Intent was to meet for 4 hours, so I'm going to continue until 8 p.m. Is that it? Sorry, 10 p.m. 8 p.m. Sorry, I'm not used to those the 24-hour clock. So until 8 p.m. if we have permission. We won't be able to go beyond 8 p.m., but we'll try to get permission to get at least as far as 8 p.m. It will not be a full 4 hours, but I know that if you're not aware, Mr. Longfield, on the weekend, I think that he was short of breath and he didn't feel very well, so he went to the hospital and he spent the weekend in the hospital, and a cardiac stent was placed, and he's feeling better now and will be returning to work Friday, it appears. So he will not be with us today. Instead of him, we have Mr. Han Dong replacing him. So we welcome you, Mr. Dong, and we also have with us today Mr. John Moffat, whom we know very well, Deputy Minister, and Douglas Nevison, Assistant Deputy Minister, Climate Change Directorate.
Members of the committee with some instructions and a few comments on how the committee will proceed with the clause-by-clause consideration of the bill. As the name indicates, this is an examination of all the clauses in the order in which they appear in the bill. I will call each clause successively, and each clause is subject to debate and a vote. If there are amendments to the clause in question, I will recognize the member proposing that amendment, who may then explain the amendment. The amendment will then be open for debate. When no future members wish to intervene, the amendment will be voted on. Amendments will be considered in the order in which they appear in the bill, or in the package each member received from the clerk. Members should note that amendments must be submitted in writing. That was done to the clerk of the committee. Though I'm told that you could actually submit an amendment from the floor. Is that's correct, Madam? Yeah. Okay. The chair will. I'll go slowly to allow members to follow the proceedings properly. Amendments have been given an alphanumeric number. There's no need for a seconder to move an amendment. Once an amendment is moved, unanimous consent is required to withdraw it. Members are permitted to move sub-amendments, but they must be submitted in writing to the clerk, who will then distribute them. These sub-amendments do not require the approval of the mover of the amendment. Only one sub-amendment may be considered at a time, and that sub-amendment cannot be amended. Once every clause has been voted on, the committee will vote on the title and the bill itself. And then the committee will have to order the chair to report the bill to the House. And so that's essentially how we proceed. Since there are a few amendments to clause 2, which is an interpretation clause, I suggest that we postpone the study of clause 2 until the end. This allows us to see which amendments are adopted that could have an impact on the definitions, which are in clause 2. As a reminder, the interpretation clause of a bill is not the place to propose a substantive amendment to a bill unless other amendments have been adopted that would warrant amendments to the interpretation clause. So,
Mr. Chair.
Yes, is that Mr. Albus? Yeah.
Yes, this is Mr. Chair. If you just permit it, before we actually begin the formal process, I'd like to make a comment, and I will be as brief as possible.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Mr. Chair, I have received some feedback, and I think it's important for the committee, for us as a group to listen to that feedback. It seems to me that a great majority of the briefs that were submitted, it's my understanding there are a large majority, the number 62 of 70 briefs were filed with us yesterday. And that was obviously after the cutoff of last Friday for amendments. That's at least the feedback that I've heard. I just wanted to say that the feedback further said that it almost felt like the committee itself was not serious in saying, please send us your thoughts. If you can't appear as a witness, please, we want to hear from you. And the person that contacted me said that they felt that the committee was rushing things and was not legitimately sincere in the process. Now, I do know that some might point out that my party is opposed to C12. That may be true. You can hold me to account for that. My voters will certainly, some of those that feel strongly about it. But I think, Mr. Chair, what I'm talking about here is the process itself. And that when people talk about cynicism and whatnot, I would just simply point out that we did raise these concerns very early in the process when the committee chose to accelerate its study. And in that compression, it seems that we've squeezed some people in their minds out of the process completely. So I would just point this out, not to point the finger and wag it at people, but to simply say that we need to do better next time, Mr. Chair. And I would just ask all committee members to think about that feedback. Maybe you've heard directly from them, but 62 or at least the majority of those briefs being submitted so late in the process really irked many of them because it felt like we were never serious about listening to them in the first place. So I praise that as in terms of process. Look, we can have debate over the product of this bill, but I do think that it's important for us that there's a trust that's given to us that we will honor that public process. And unfortunately, we did not pass that bar.
That's noted, Mr. Abbas. So if there are no other, Ms. May, well, Ms. May, this is, is this a point of order or I mean?
No, I wanted to comment on Dan Albas's comment, and from very different perspectives, since I want urgent climate action. I also found it very distressing that so many witnesses weren't heard and that we closed anybody other than the minister. The sum total of our study on this bill is 7.5 hours. I know I'm not a member of this committee. I'll speak to that point later, Mr. Chair, but I think it really makes a mockery about inviting the public to send comments when amendments are due before the comments are received.
Understood. Understood. So we'll proceed now to clause by clause. We will start with, as I said, we'll do clause 2 at the very end because it's a clause of which it has definitions. So we'll start with clause 3. So I'm asking the committee, shall clause 3 carry? How do we do the yays and nays, Madam Clerk? Do we? Is it a roll call vote every time, or just basically if no one objects, I assume unanimous consent? Okay.
Recorded vote, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Recorded vote, please, Madam Clerk.
Just one moment. Okay, the vote is on clause 3. Mr. Baker?
In favor.
Mr. Biddle?
In favor.
Mr. Dong?
Yes.
Mr. Seni?
Yes.
Ms. Sachs?
Yes.
Mr. Albas?
Opposed.
Mr. Genereux?
Opposed.
Ms. McLeod?
Opposed.
Mr. Redekop?
Opposed.
Ms. Michaud?
En favor.
And Mr. Bacharach?
In favor.
Sounds like it carries.
Yes.
Okay. So we'll go to clause 4. And here there is there are some suggested amendments. We'll start with PV 2. PV, does that stand for Parti Vert or just
Parti Vert.
Parti Vert? Ms. May, would you like to present the amendment?
Yes, and first I need to put on the record a small reminder to committee. I'm here because you passed a motion to which I objected. An identical motion was passed in every committee, so I am coerced to be here. You have probably, with no personal knowledge of this, it's not personal to any one of you individually, but this process is one that reduces the rights that I would otherwise have to present amendments at report stage, substantive amendments to which I could speak at length. The process we are now in is novel. It was created when Stephen Harper was Prime Minister. It was to punish me for the 432 amendments I brought forward to try to get changes to the Omnibus Budget Bill C-38, which we won't get into detail, there isn't time. But it surprisingly continues the same process under the Liberals to deprive members of smaller parties of rights we would otherwise have. So I need to put that on the record because no doubt at some point, as I speak to my 37 amendments, you may wish I wasn't here. But I'm here because you have created a situation that coerces me to be here. And my amendments are deemed to be put forward because I don't have the right to put them forward myself and I don't have the right to vote on them. And I must speak to them briefly. But I will say I did send to the clerk of the committee and the committee members a list of witnesses who could have aided this committee, including the Minister of Climate from New Zealand, the Honourable James Shaw, who just brought forward a Climate Accountability Act in New Zealand, the head of the Sabin Centre for Climate Law at Columbia University Law School. There was some decision made behind closed doors by other members of this committee to move so quickly that those witnesses could not be heard. No Indigenous witnesses live before committee, no young people live before committee, and no presentation by climate scientists on the reasons for urgency. I turn quickly to my amendment here. By the way, Mr. Chair, I think the Parliament, when it was when the government of Canada under Stephen Harper, they looked at the first initial of my party name in English and decided, oh, we can't have Green G when we have government G. So that's why I think Parti Vert, PV, that's alors Parti Vert. This amendment is to correct a scientific inaccuracy that is embedded in this legislation. It's embedded in the title of the legislation. It's embedded in the preamble. In other words, it cherry picks Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change Science in order to focus on net zero by 2050 without focusing on the reality that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says that to hold to 1.5 degrees, which is the goal of the Paris Agreement, and as far below 2 as possible, the window on that will close well before 2030. So, and again, I'll probably have another opportunity to explain this, but when we say if we have 1.5 degrees Celsius, that will mean we're at net zero by 2050. That's true. It is not scientifically accurate to say if we can get to net zero by 2050, we will have 1.5 degrees Celsius secured. The IPCC has been very clear that without dramatic reductions immediately in this decade, the window on 1.5 will close and close forever before we get past 2030. So that's why the purpose of the Act, to be consistent with Paris, must include the notions of urgency, immediate, and ambitious action. So that's the purpose amendment that I suggest for line 13 to ensure that when we talk about the targets, we talk about near-term targets, not only the one till 2050. And I hope this amendment will meet with the approval of the majority of members of this committee. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, yes, just one moment, please. Sorry about that. I have an open line to the legislative clerks, and so we're just getting used to the technology. Is there anyone who wants to speak to this amendment, to debate this amendment? So we'll see. Mr. Biddle.
Just very quickly, Mr. Chair, we believe that amendment NDP 1 addresses this same issue and does so in an effective way. And unfortunately, we cannot support this amendment.
Okay, anyone else? No. Shall we vote on it? Do we need
Recorded vote?
Okay, so just so that I know, Mr. Albas, is that going to be all the way through?
I think so.
Okay, fine. Just so that I know where we're headed.
Yep.
Okay, recorded vote, please. Yeah.
So the vote is on the amendment PV2. Mr. Baker,
Opposed.
Intervenir. Mr. Chair, Legislative Clerk speaking.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Just maybe before going to the vote, you might want to inform the committee members of the impact on the following amendment. You know, you might have
I'm
a little...
so sorry. Yeah, I didn't see it. I'm so I apologize.
No problem.
Committee members, we'll get it into our groove quick enough. If PV2 is adopted, NDP 1 cannot be moved as they amend the same. So I just wanted to say that before we vote, so we can do the roll call vote now.
okay, I'll just start again. So PV2, Mr. Baker,
Opposed.
Mr. Biddle,
Opposed.
Mr. Dong,
Opposed.
Mr. Saini,
Opposed.
Miss Sachs, opposed. Mr. Albus,
Opposed.
Mr. Jenner,
Opposed.
Ms. McLeod,
Opposed.
Mr. Redekop.
There we are. Opposed.
Madame Michaud
En faveur.
and Mr. Bacharach.
Opposed.
So
Okay.
it's defeated. Now that means we can't do NDP 1. Is that right, Mr. Maziad? Yeah.
No, it means the opposite, I believe, Mr. Chair.
Exactly.
Yes, Mr.
Oh, right.
Chair.
It's not adopted. Sorry. I'm so sorry. Yeah. Okay. So let's thanks for catching that, Mr. Bacharach.
If I may,
Please present your
Mr.
motion.
Chair, I would like to present Ms. Collins' motion NDP 1, and I'm not sure if you'd like me to read it into the record, but
Well, you don't need to read it, but I mean, it's up to you. But if you
it's in the package. It's very much in the spirit of what Ms. May put forward. We prefer the more concise wording, and I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So any other?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr.
just a question through yourself to the legislative clerk. I'm sorry I missed earlier with PV2. Which consequential amendments does that change? And which are there any in NDP 1 that would relate to other parts of the bill?
Would somebody like to answer that? I'm just going, amendment by amendment.
I can try speaking to it, Mr.
Yeah.
Chair. I believe, Mr. Albus, that the two amendments deal with the same part of the bill in a very similar way with slightly different wording. And we just voted down Ms. May's amendment, and we're now dealing with our
Okay, so
version
there
of
wasn't
the same
consequential is what I was asking.
There
So,
weren't, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Just got it from somewhere. Not where I thought I would get it, but thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. So seeing no other hands up, I guess we'll proceed to a vote. Recorded vote.
Yes, a motion NDP 1. Mr. Baker,
In favor.
Mr. Biddle,
In favor.
Mr. Dong,
Yes.
Mr. Saini,
In favor.
Ms. Sachs,
In favor.
Mr. Albus,
Opposed?
Mr. Jenner,
Opposed.
Ms. McLeod,
Opposed.
Mr. Redekop,
Opposed.
Madame Michaud,
En faveur.
and Mr. Bacharach.
In favor.
So that is 9-4. No, excuse me, 7-4
In favor.
in favor.
So it is adopted. We now go to Parti Vert 3. Ms. May, would you like to speak to it?
Yes, thank you. Again, we're in the same rubric here of clause 4. And again, to add a specificity to what our international commitments are. I appreciate your point, Taylor. Mine was more wordy above, and I hope that the NDP might support this one, in that what our international commitments are in respect of mitigating climate change are very specifically about limiting global average temperature and to try to hold that temperature increase to 1.5 degrees C. And then it goes on to continue with the last bit, and of achieving net zero by 2050 and Canada's international commitments. So it's to bring it into sharp focus what we actually committed to do in Paris and embed that in the purpose of the legislation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Madame Michaud?
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. This is a good amendment from Ms. May. I'd just like to explain that the following one, which was proposed by the bloc, is essentially the same, but with one additional detail, which clarifies in the purpose of the Act that it's not just net zero emission for 2050 that's a purpose, but also reaching the 2030 targets from the Paris Agreement. And that's through accountability mechanisms in the Act. So it's essentially the same, but with one extra detail. So perhaps I would ask people to consider the following amendment, because what I've understood is that if this one is voted, we cannot vote on the following one. Is that correct? Given that it would amend the same lines. Yes, I understand what you're saying. Well, that's not what I was told, but it is what I had thought. So just a moment, please.
Bon, Madame Michaud, on vient.
Ms. Michaud, I have just been told that we can adopt both. There's no conflict between the two. In other words, PV3 amends line 15 in English, and BQ4 would replace lines 16 to 18 in English. So there's no conflict between the two. Excellent. Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Very quickly, we oppose this as the preamble already deals with this. The Canadian Net Zero Emissions Accountability Act, or SNEZA, as some people have suggested me. I hope that doesn't catch on, but already reaffirms the goal to limiting global temperature increases well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, while pursuing efforts to limit that increase to 1.5 degrees. So we see it as redundant.
I have Ms. May and Mr. Albus.
I was going to say it was, sorry, I left my hand up from what I was going to say to Madame Michaud, that we were actually consistent and could adopt both.
Okay.
But I'd say to Mr. Biddle, the preambular language does tend to focus on 2050 and not on the immediate, which is why embedding 1.5 at this point would be wise.
Mr. Albus?
Yes,
May,
thank you.
Take your hand down. That would be helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just briefly to Mr. Biddle's comments, I was wondering to see if we could ask the government officials that my understanding is the preamble is really there to kind of set the stage for the bill, but actually has no binding force. And so it's much different when you put something or mention something in a preamble than actually in the legislation itself. Could that be confirmed by the officials?
Do any of the officials want to address that? Mr. Moffat?
I actually think that's better addressed by your legislative council.
Yeah, I thought so. Maybe I don't know, Madame Tivierge or Mr. Mesiad. Yes, Madame Tivierge.
Yes. I'm not sure I can be of much help. It would probably need a legislative council or to explain it.
Well, my understanding is that when the statute is published, the preamble is taken out because it's not seemed to have any force and effect of the actual statute. So, the argument the government is making is that it's redundant. And so I'm just asking, is that the case from a legislative viewpoint?
I can answer that. So statutes with preambles, passed with preambles, are published with their preambles. Preambles can be used in judicial interpretation, but they have less influence than a purpose provision, which in turn has less influence than a substantive provision that provides an explicit obligation.
So is it redundant then, or is it just because the government has structured the bill in such a way that the preamble there's an allusion to it versus in the actual bill itself?
The clause 4 refers to international commitments. I won't speak for Ms. May, but I don't think the objective is to change those international commitments. It's simply to reinforce those. So the way the bill is drafted, it refers to those commitments, which do, as the preamble indicates, do include joining the international effort to enhance efforts to reduce, to take immediate action to reduce temperature, to minimize temperature gain. The amendment would make that those obligations would refer to those obligations specifically, but wouldn't actually change them.
Okay, and thank you for that. I may have similar questions because there are a lot of preambles, and I want to make sure that we get this bill right. Thank you.
Ms. May and then Madame Michaud.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, point of order. I always enjoy Ms. May's interventions, but they're with respect to members of the committee and the back and forth. I know there's rules that we agreed to, and I don't know that the rules permit for the back and forth. So just to put that out.
The back and forth in terms of what Mr. Albus did?
No, in terms of Ms. May and not being a member of the...
No, but
since I'm here because you passed a motion that I object to vehemently, that reduces my rights. The decision not to allow me to speak to something when I've been asked whether it's redundant or not, whether the preamble has force of law or not. Chris, honestly...
Well, I think it's Ms. May's amendment, so I think it would be useful if we heard from her, to help us understand a bit better. So go ahead, Ms. May.
Sorry for losing my temper, Mr. Chair, but it's been years of having to run from committee to committee because every committee passes an identical motion under the fiction that the committee is in charge of its own process, the master of its own process. The notion that every committee in the House of Commons simultaneously came up with identical language to reduce my rights doesn't stand scrutiny. So I apologize, but I've been through almost 10 years of larger parties reducing the rights of a much smaller party. We don't have very many rights. So to speak to this briefly, I wanted to thank Dan because, again, it isn't redundant to put it in the legislation. John Moffat's summary is correct. I mean, in terms of statutory interpretation 101 in any law school in this country, everyone knows the preamble has very little impact and can only be used for statutory interpretation. If the matter goes before a judge, the judge will take note of what's in a preamble, but it doesn't have the impact of putting it in the legislation. And I would think the Liberals on this committee would be proud to embrace 1.5, just as a matter of historical record. The first industrialized country Minister of Environment during COP21 in Paris to say that the text of the Paris Agreement should include 1.5 degrees as a goal was Catherine McKenna, the first, and everyone else followed. And now we are running to net zero by 2050 instead of saying firmly and clearly this legislation should be about holding to 1.5 degrees Celsius.
Madame Michaud.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Ms. Michaud? Yes, Chair, I just want to add that I agree with Ms. May and Mr. Albus. It is not redundant to put it in. And clearly, the section has more force than the preamble. And it is the essence of the bill. Net zero emission is really consistent with the Paris Agreement, so I just don't see any problem in putting it into this paragraph. Okay, I know that Madame Thibierge may have something to add. Yes, to help us understand. Yes, if you look at the Interpretation Act, Section 13 is preamble. The preamble, it says preamble is part of the text and constitutes a description of the grounds in English.
Shall be read as a part of the enactment intended to assist in explaining its purpose and object. So what the Interpretation Act says about the preamble.
Okay, Mr. Baker.
Sorry, Chair. I lower my hand. I meant to speak to something, but I don't need to.
Okay. So seeing no more hands up, I guess we can proceed to the vote on PV3. A roll call vote, of course.
Mr. Baker.
Opposed.
Mr. Biddle.
Opposed.
Mr. Dong, excuse me.
No problem. No.
Mr. Saini.
Opposed.
Ms. Sachs. No. Mr. Albus.
Opposed.
Mr. Jenner.
Opposed.
Ms. McLeod.
Opposed.
Mr. Redekop.
Opposed.
Madame Michaud.
En faveur.
And Mr. Bacharach.
In favor.
So that is 9 against, 2 for.
Okay, so it does not pass. We'll go now to BQ4. Madame Michaud, aimeriez-vous nous...
Ms. Michaud, would you like to talk to us about your amendment? Yes, as I've already said, it's not specified that the agreement of the bill is not only net zero emissions by 2050, but also meeting the 2030 target. And to achieve those targets, we need accountability mechanisms. And so that's the little addition that we put in. Does anyone wish to speak to this? I don't see any. So perhaps we could vote. Again, recorded division, roll call vote.
Opposé.
Mr. Biddle.
Opposed.
Mr. Dong.
Sorry about that. Opposed.
Mr. Saini.
Opposed.
Ms. Sachs. Opposed. Mr. Albus.
Opposed.
Mr. Genaro.
Opposed.
Ms. McLeod.
Opposed.
Mr. Redekop.
No.
Madame Michaud.
En faveur, oui.
Mr. Bacharach.
In favor.
Okay, that's 2 in favor, 9 opposed.
Right. Okay. So it doesn't pass. So now we'll go to clause 4. Anyone have anything to say about clause 4? Can we go to the vote? Yes.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Mr. Albus.
I'll just simply say we're going to be opposing this provision in it, but I do appreciate some of the arguments that were made by other members for examining this clause. And I think that some of the illustrations we could receive from Mr. Moffat, as well as from the legal or the legislative clerk, will be helpful for our deliberations in future clauses. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other no other members interested in speaking to this, we'll go to the vote on clause 4. Madam Clerk.
Yes, Mr. Baker.
In favor.
Mr. Biddle.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I'm sorry, the legislative clerk.
Yes.
Clause 4 as amended.
Right, as amended. Yeah. So sorry. So I'm just getting the hang of this. Yeah, right. Clause 4 as amended. I was looking at clause 5. Okay, go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Okay, so we
Thank
had
you, Madam Thibierge.
We had Mr. Baker, Mr. Biddle,
In favor.
Mr. Dong,
In favor?
Mr. Saini,
In favor?
Ms. Sachs,
Yes.
Mr. Albus,
Opposed?
Mr. Genera,
Opposed.
Ms. McLeod,
Opposed.
Mr. Reddecup,
No.
Madame Michaud,
En faveur.
and Mr. Bacharach.
I'm in favor.
Okay, so that is 4 against, 7 for.
Now we go to clause 5. There are no amendments to clause 5. Does anyone want to speak to clause 5?
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, could you use your yellow hand? It would make it easier on me. Perfect.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We will be voting opposed. Simply, we do believe that a whole of government approach is required to deal with climate change, but we will be having some specific proposals later on in the bills that will outline how we believe that the governor and council and the relationship of the minister responsible should be done. We don't believe that the government has gotten it right in this regard. And so certainly Conservatives will be voting in opposition of the clause as that it has been written.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we'll proceed to a vote. Madam Clerk, if you could do the roll call vote.
Sure. Clause 5, Mr. Baker.
Sorry, we're voting on clause 5.
Yep.
Yes.
In favor.
Mr. Biddle,
In favor.
Mr. Dong,
In favor?
Mr. Saini,
In favor?
Ms. Sachs,
Yes.
Mr. Albus,
Opposed?
Mr. Genereux.
Opposed. Sorry.
Ms. McLeod,
Opposed.
Mr. Reddecup,
Opposed.
Madame Michaud,
En faveur.
and Mr. Bacharach.
In favor.
Okay, so that is 7 in favor, 4 opposed.
Thank you. Okay, now we go to clause 6. It'll get more interesting here. So we have the BQ5, and what I will say is that if BQ5 is adopted, BQ6 and PV4 cannot be moved as they amend the same line. So would Madame Michaud like to speak to BQ5?
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président. J'aimerais ne pas présenter.
Yes, thank you. I would like not to present 5 and move straight to BQ6 instead. So you're withdrawing your amendment? Yes. Well, please, Madame Tivierge, can you tell me whether or not we need to have a unanimous consent to withdraw this? No, because it's not being moved. It doesn't have to be. It was submitted, but it has not been moved. And she's saying she's not going to move it. So we don't need unanimous consent because it hasn't been moved. Okay. So that's an important nuance.
Mr. Albus.
Yeah, just in regards to this, I know there will be some people that are eagerly watching this. I just wanted to make sure they understand that it's up to members to decide whether or not they want to proceed with a particular motion. I know that in my case, we submitted amendments quite early on and actually heard testimony that changed our minds on our approach. And so we submitted other ones. So Conservatives certainly will be seeking amendments, but we won't be actually putting forward every one of them. I thought that would be a helpful little tip for those that are watching that are watching the proceedings today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. It is helpful for sure to understanding the process. So we'll go now to BQ6, and if BQ6 is adopted, PV4 cannot be moved as they amend the same line. So would Madame Michaud like to speak to BQ6?
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We'd like to clarify that the purpose is net zero emissions as soon as possible, and that 2050 is a deadline, but our objective is to get there quickly. Okay, are there any other interventions? Yes, Mr. Biddle.
Just very quickly, we're opposed, but it's because the government, the G2 amendment addresses the same topic and deals with a similar issue.
Okay, Mr. Albus.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just simply going to oppose this amendment, but now that Mr. Biddle has raised G2, just so I can get a sense from the legislative clerk, or maybe perhaps Mr. Moffat might want to comment, whoever this would be best directed at. Nothing in this precludes that nothing in this bill specifically designates that net zero can happen earlier. It doesn't say you cannot have it before 2050. Is that correct?
Was this a question too?
So either the legislative clerk or Mr. Moffat, because I think there seems to be an indication that somehow the bill itself precludes that net zero could happen before the time.
I have a hunch Mr. Moffat might be the person to, is that correct?
That's correct. Nothing in the bill as written currently precludes achieving the goal of net zero before 2050.
Okay, well, maybe I'll just keep that in mind, Mr. Chair, because when we get to government 2, I think that's the question I have on my mind is if nothing precludes it. But we'll ask those questions when we get to that part of the bill. Thank you for your help, Mr. Moffat.
Okay, thanks. So, where were we now? We were at the BQ6. Madame Michaud, est-ce que vous l'avez présenté? Vous l'avez présenté, Madame Michaud?
Mr. Albus. Ms. Michaud, you presented BQ6, correct? Yes. Very well. So no one else wishes to speak to it? In that case, we can vote. So again, recorded division.
Mr. Baker.
Opposed.
Mr. Biddle.
Opposed.
Mr. Dong.
Opposed.
Mr. Saini.
Opposed.
Ms. Sachs.
Opposed.
Mr. Albus.
Opposed.
Mr. Jenner.
Opposed.
Ms. McLeod.
Opposed.
Mr. Redekop.
I'm opposed.
Madame Michaud.
En faveur.
And Mr. Bacharach.
Opposed.
Okay, so 10 opposed, 1 for.
Okay, so it's defeated. That means we PV4 can be moved. Madam May, do you wish to move it?
I would love to, but I'm not allowed to. Not under the terms of the motion the committee passed, not to split hairs. But all of my motions are deemed moved by others.
Right.
I'm here at your sufferance once again.
No. Well, you're right. You can't move, but it is deemed moved by others. And I guess what I wanted to say was, would you like to speak to it?
Yes, thank you. And again, under the terms of the committee's motion, I'm invited to speak to my amendments. This one is to deal with, and this basically to remind members of the expert evidence we had from West Coast Environmental Law, from their staff counsel, Andrew Gage. And unlike some of my other amendments, I scrambled to get this one ready after hearing his evidence. That, of course, when we talk about net zero, this is a different concept than the one Madame Michaud brought forward. Oh, I'm not even on any channel for interpretation. Sorry. It's Madame Michaud mentioned as quickly as possible was the goal of her amendment that was just defeated. This one speaks to a different issue, not the timeliness, but the concept of absolute versus net. And I note that G2 will also use the word absolute at different points, but the absolute greenhouse gas emissions are different from net. Net meaning once you've had all the sequestration activity of green leafy things, where do you end up? Or maybe there's some new technology that sucks carbon out of the air. Net zero doesn't imply absolute zero. So the amendment that I've brought forward here comes from West Coast Environmental Law, and their suggestion that net zero be coupled with absolute greenhouse gas emission reductions of at least 90% below 2005 levels over the same period, such that we, for instance, don't buy large amounts of credits from other countries as opposed to doing the work at home to reduce our emissions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Now, I've been told that this amendment is problematic, so and that and that leads me to make the following ruling that it's not admissible, and I will tell everyone why. Bill C-12 requires that national targets for the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions in Canada be set with the objective of attaining net zero emissions by 2050. The bill establishes that net zero emissions means that anthropogenic emissions of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere are balanced by anthropogenic removals of greenhouse gases from the atmosphere over a specified period. The amendment PV4 seeks to achieve the net zero emissions through an absolute greenhouse gas emissions reduction of at least 90% below 2005 levels, which is not foreseen in the bill. So as the House of Commons Procedure and Practice book, 3rd edition, states on page 770, quote, an amendment to a bill that was referred to committee after second reading is out of order if it is beyond the scope and principle of the bill. So in my opinion, PV4 introduces a new concept that is beyond the scope of the bill. Therefore, I must rule the amendment inadmissible.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Madam.
I understand putting forward amendments that are outside the scope of the bill, and I certainly wouldn't do that. I wonder, is there any way, this is certainly within the scope of the bill, to meet our Paris commitments, and to say that an absolute reduction by 90% by 2050 is outside the scope of the bill, I must say, Mr. Chair, I'll register that that is a surprise.
Okay, one moment. I'll get back to you on how you can challenge this decision. Apparently, Madam May, to challenge the chair's ruling, one has to be a member of the committee, and unfortunately, that's not the case. So you won't be able to challenge it. I imagine somebody else can challenge it. Mr. Albas.
Yeah, but before I go through it, because I really view a challenge of the chair is, something you don't do every day, Mr. Chair. But I just have a question though. The term absolute zero would mean 100%. And so what I think the question here is, I don't, by the way, agree with this motion, but I do believe that people should be heard. And if she's given the right to come to committee to table this, I think that at least she deserves an up or down vote. So we can be accountable, and then we can say that there was a fair hearing. So the question I would just have, Mr. Chair, is absolute would mean to me 100%. She's just simply qualifying a proportion of net zero being 90%. At least that's my take of it. Maybe Ms. May might have a different version of it.
Yeah, I mean it's clever math, but I don't know if that's what really the rule.
Mr. Chair, like 90% of something is not 100% of a thing, and that's pretty clear. It's not absolute. Absolute usually is absolute 100% or absolute zero.
I think absolute here means that you can't balance it with something else. But Ms. May did get a chance to address the committee to say why she disagreed. But if you'd like to challenge the chair, Mr. Albas, you can do so, but without debate. So we'd go straight to a vote. Is that correct, Ms. Tivierge?
Just in regards to that, Mr. Chair, maybe we might want to hear from Mr. Redekop first, and then I'll make my mind. Because
I'm not sure we can do that. That's
just Mr. Chair. How can we have a challenge the chair if we don't even understand your process?
Well, this is what I'm going to check, and I'll get right back to you. So this is going to be slow moving for a while until we hit our stride. So Ms. Tivierge confirms my understanding, which is if you're challenging the ruling, we go straight to a vote. There's no debate. Mr. Redekop can speak later about something else if he wishes, but there's no debate around your challenge. So we'll go to the vote. Ms.
Point of order, Chair. It's Han here.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah, I just want to understand what's going on here. Ms. May is moved to challenge the chair, but she cannot do that.
She cannot do that. So Mr. Albus is kindly taking it up for her.
Okay.
And I didn't challenge the chair. I said the ruling was a surprise. I would not challenge the chair, even if I was a member of the committee, because as Dan says, it's a very unusual move. I was surprised by the legal interpretation. I'm sorry for taking more time. I didn't plan to intervene again, but I don't want it on the record that I moved to challenge the chair. I didn't. I didn't try to, even if I could have.
Fair enough, but I think Mr. Albus wants to nonetheless challenge.
Just to be clear, I have not. If I moved, I challenged the chair. That is something that has not come out of my lips, Mr. Chair.
Okay,
I just was simply asking you a question just so I could understand your reasoning, and so I could leave it with that. But if other members have questions about your reasoning, perhaps you might want to acknowledge them first. But I have not made that motion. I'm not persuaded yet, but it sounds like other members have questions.
Got it. No, I'm glad no one's challenging the chair. So we'll go to Mr. Redekop.
Thank you. So in the spirit of there's no such thing as a dumb question, I'm going to ask this question. Mr. Chair, you said the bill says anthropomorphic is balanced by the pluses and minuses balances out. Where does it actually say that in the bill? And that's why I say I hope this isn't too dumb of a question, but because I'm not sure I saw that, and maybe I just missed it.
Okay, well let's just pause for a second.
I can answer that if Mr. Chair. It's John
thank
Moffat.
you, Mr. Moffat. Yeah.
So in clause 2, the last definition is the definition of net zero emissions, which is defined to mean that anthropogenic emissions of GHGs are balanced by anthropogenic removals over a specified period of time. So the chair was correct in his interpretation of net zero, and Ms. May's motion would simply say that net zero has to be achieved by at a minimum 90% removals, and then by consequence up to, but only up to 10% could be continue to be emitted, but balanced by removals.
Okay, thank you. And that would explain why it's always good to read the definitions.
Yes, that's right. So that's PV4 is inadmissible. Mr. Albus, is your hand up again, or is it just
yes,
from before?
It is up again. Okay. I just wanted to ask Mr. Moffat. So I'm just trying to understand this definition of absolute zero. Obviously, this is your job. This is your full-time job to understand these terms. Is what is being suggested by Madam May, is it absolute as in 100%, or would you interpret it to say that it is something other than absolute, and therefore it would be within the scope of the bill?
Yeah, my understanding, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Moffat, I think we're talking about two different things. One is the definition of basically it has to do with whether we have offsets or we don't, and then we're talking about even without offsets, we're at 90% of 205 levels. Is that my understanding correct? Under PV4, I mean it's really about whether offsets.
That's my interpretation.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
But the motion, the amendment would require 90% reductions.
Yeah,
and then,
which is not net zero.
And then in order to achieve net zero, there would be a remaining 10%, which could either be reduced, of course, or could be offset.
Oh, I see. It could be offset. Okay. But anyway, I hope does that answer your question?
Well, it does, but it is not consistent with your ruling. But that being said, Mr. Chair, I know being chair is a difficult job. I wouldn't want it, unless I was forced into your chair position because you had to step out of the room. And then I expect 100% that I will be challenged immediately by someone, even probably from my own party. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate the intervention by Mr. Moffat.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, just can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
I just want to point out, I guess, that we didn't actually approve the definitions yet, too. So they theoretically could be adjusted to fit with this one, could they not?
Yes, yes, I guess they could. They could, but I don't think I don't know about that particular definition because it was. That's a good question. Let me ask Madame Tivierge. I mean, I'll get back to you, Mr. Redekop, but my sense is that we've adopted the bill at second reading where net zero includes offsets, and maybe that particular definition cannot, really be changed. But I'll get back to you. So apparently, my understanding is correct that this kind of substantive definition of net zero emissions was adopted at second reading. So Ms. May's amendment, changes the scope of the bill, so it goes right to the heart of the bill, and that is essentially why it is not admissible. Does that answer your question, Mr. Redekop?
Yeah, I think so. I'm okay with that. I'm not going to hold this up any longer.
Okay. So where were we? Okay, so we're on to PV5. Ms. May?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think this discussion shows the benefit of having had longer, if we had longer in hindsight, of the committee members to hear different witnesses. I just want to quote at this point from Andrew Gage, who is an expert in climate law and he is a lawyer, and he does understand legislation. But what he points out, and this is again one of his amendments that I've put forward from West Coast Environmental Law, that the minister may set additional targets as opposed to the one that was mandatory last time. I hope this one will meet the legislative clerk and advisors' approval that this is within the scope, but the minister may set additional targets with respect to absolute greenhouse gas emission reductions. And I just wanted to quote Andrew Gage on this point. In terms of accountability, he says, quote, accountability in both the climate and financial realms can be undermined through weak rules that allow for accounting tricks that create the appearance of responsibility. Legislation should require efforts to meet these targets to maximize absolute reductions, as opposed to relying on less certain measures like offsets and unproven technologies. So there's the difference between what's absolute and what's net. Certainly net zero by 2050 is a fine target as long as there are absolute reductions all along the way that meet the only pathway the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has identified that actually allows us to hold to a hospitable climate and a survivable planet, which is to say that we need steep reductions sooner than later in order to hold to 1.5 degrees. And that threshold for it being the point of no return and we lose 1.5 forever is actually 2030. So absolute emission reduction targets may be required, and the minister would be in a position with this amendment to make such decisions, to make such determinations, not inconsistent at all, but completely consistent with the goals of this act. Thank you.
Thank you. And no one's flagged to me that it is not admissible. So it is admissible. Mr. Albas.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So Conservatives have reviewed this. We won't be supporting it. We do think that it's important for all parties, particularly given that COP26 will include, I'm sure, what will be a robust discussion around the use of non-anthropogenic storage, sequestration, nature-based climate solutions, et cetera. And even the government, I'm sure, would probably take some issues as it's put out some regulatory guidance as to what entails an offset. For example, the planting of trees that won't be cut down for 100 years. I do note that there are some industry stakeholders that view that their sequestration activities they believe are also valid. So I do grant that there are some people that would like to see, a greater amount of those natural offsets included, and I can see where some would be opposed to it. But again, I do think that if we are going to expect, significant capital investments, that government and Parliament should be giving some specific guidance, as well as some regulatory certainty as to what the rules of the game are. I think it's perfectly legitimate, though, to question those rules or to ask for them to be tighter. But we will not be supporting this amendment. Every Canadian, every liberal target that has been put forward, Mr. Chair, has never been met. And so, I think this would just create, again, more regulatory uncertainty, as well as more cynicism if a target isn't attained. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? So we can go to Mr. Redekop.
I just want to point out that, because I can't help it, but I mean, in a space of a week, we went from 30 to 36 to 45%. So I don't think the government has any problem setting additional targets as required. So.
Okay, so that means you're supporting this?
No. That means I think this is redundant and unnecessary.
Okay. We'll go, could you put your hand down, Mr. Redekop? So we'll go to a vote now, Madam Clerk.
Yes, the vote on PV5, Mr. Baker,
Opposed.
Mr. Biddle,
Opposed.
Mr. Dong,
Opposed.
Mr. Saini,
Opposed.
Ms. Sachs,
Opposed.
Mr. Albus,
Opposed.
Mr. Jenner,
Opposed.
Ms. McLeod,
Opposed.
Mr. Redekop,
Opposed.
Madame Michaud,
En faveur.
and Mr. Bachrach.
I'm opposed.
Okay, so 1 in favor and 10 opposed.
does not carry. Now, shall clause 6 as amended carry? Can we do a roll call?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'm sorry, there was no amendment adopted, so it's just clause 6. It's not amended.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but shall it carry? Madam, I was just trying to sound smart, I guess, but shall clause 6 carry? Can we do a roll call vote?
Yes, Mr. Baker,
In favor.
Mr. Biddle,
In favor.
Mr. Dong,
Yes.
Mr. Saini,
In favor.
Ms. Sachs,
Favor.
Mr. Albus,
Opposed?
Mr. Genereux,
Opposed.
Ms. McLeod,
Opposed.
Mr. Redekop,
Opposed.
Madame Michaud,
En faveur.
and Mr. Backrack.
In favor.
Okay, so 7 in favor, 4
Okay, great.
opposed.
Now we have G2, Government 2, for a new clause 6.1. Mr. Saini, I believe you're proposing it.
Yes. Basically, I just want to propose this just to provide greater certainty. Although there's nothing clearly written in the bill, I actually want to make sure that people understand that if we achieve net zero before 2050, then that's fine. And I think we all hope that we can do that. So I just want to put that in there for greater certainty and for greater clarity.
Ms. McLeod.
Thank you, Chair. And I sort of look at this as a high jumping competition. The bar is set so high, and if you exceed, there's no issues. I would ask the legislative clerks, is there any legislative reasons that you would ever worry that if you achieve your goal ahead of time, that it would be against your legislative commitments? It's just a very odd thing from my perspective, and completely unnecessary, I would presume.
Would that be more a question for the officials, or would that be a question for Mr. Moffat or Mr. Nevis?
Well, I could be either, but I think it is.
You think
we're
it's
making
more
a
for
legislative amendment, but I don't think there is anything in the legislation that has ever precluded anyone from outperforming what their goals are.
Well, Madame Maître Thivierge, would you like to address that?
Actually, it's more a question for the officials.
That's what I figured.
Yeah.
Mr. Moffat.
So I would agree with the interpretation of the act, that there's nothing in this act that precludes the government or any government from jumping higher than the bars set, to continue Ms. McLeod's analogy. So this would add legal certainty, but it doesn't change the legal provisions in the act as they're written.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moffat. Mr. Albus.
Thank you. I just want to ask the legislative clerk, though, if this particular amendment is not made, what changes in the bill? Or, pardon me, maybe I'll reverse the questioning here. If this is added in, does this in effect change the bill in any way? Does it compel the government to act in a different way?
You're wonderful.
Once again, Mr. Chair, since it's not a procedural question, I think one of the officials could answer that.
So I'll jump in again and say no, there would be no new legal obligation placed on the government of today as a result of this amendment. This amendment would serve to signify to the public, to Parliament, that urgent early action and achievement of net zero is desired, but it would not have any specific legal implications for decision making or for the government in implementing any of the provisions in the Act.
So it would have communications value, more communications value maybe than legal value.
Well said.
That was going to be my question, Mr. Chair.
Well,
Is this just a rhetorical exercise, or does this actually meaningfully tackle the issue in a different way? And so conservatives, are committed to acting on climate. My leader's been very clear on his commitment to ESGI principles and towards working with industry. But in this seems to be more billing for the government in terms of communications than actual substantiveness. So conservatives will be voting opposed, and I'm sure Mr. Saini will not take that personally. Thank you.
Mr. Bachrach.
Yeah, at the risk of belaboring this, I think the intention here is just to make it clear that the goal isn't getting to net zero in 2050. It's acting in an immediate and dramatic way to reduce emissions. And we did hear testimony that expressed some concern about the way that the deadline was being framed. So I think, to Mr. Albus's point, absolutely, it's a point of communication around the intent more than it is something that's binding, but it's still something I'll support for clarity.
Okay. So Mr. Albus, I think your hand was up from before. I don't want to. Okay, thanks. So can we go to a vote, Madam Clerk?
Yes. So Mr. Baker.
Madam Clerk, we're voting on Mr. Saini's amendment. Is that correct?
It's a new clause 6.1, I believe.
Yes.
But we're voting on G2. Is that correct?
Yeah, but
yes.
it's creating a new 6.1.
Okay. Yes.
I'm in favor.
Okay. Mr. Biddle.
In favor.
Mr. Dong.
In favor.
Mr. Saini.
In favor.
Ms. Sachs.
In favor.
Mr. Albus.
Opposed.
Mr. Generer.
Opposed.
Ms. McLeod.
Opposed.
Mr. Redekop.
No.
Madam Michaud.
Pardon, en faveur.
And Mr. Bacharach.
In favor.
Okay, that is 7 in favor, 4 opposed.
Thank you. We'll go now to Clause 7 and CPC1. Before Mr. Albus moves it, I would just mention to the committee that if this amendment is adopted, I believe that it will have to, there are other CPC amendments, I think, seeking the same goal, changing the word minister to governor and council. So this will run through, as I understand it, the bill. But go ahead, Mr. Albus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the members of the committee for their consideration of CPC 1. Obviously, the goal of tackling climate change requires a whole of government response, which means buy-in from the governor and council, or to those that may be unaware of the term governor and council, the cabinet, as it makes decisions. So the minister would set a target under this a national greenhouse gas target and submit that to the governor and council. The governor and council would debate it. Now, we've heard today that there are some that would like to see more action, some that may want to see the same, or maybe even just a change in direction, because technology is constantly changing. Provinces, obviously, this is a great country, and provinces are, and their governments change, and perhaps new information comes up. So we do think that by approaching it from a governor and council, from the cabinet itself, endorsing that, that this will be a stronger piece of legislation, that there will be further buy-in from different departments of, given that the cabinet ministers involved would have been involved in ratifying that decision. So I would ask all members that if you believe that there needs to be an informed target that is set, given to cabinet then deliberates and comes to a conclusion, and then rallies behind that, then I think that we would have a much better bill. So perhaps there might be some further debate where I might need to jump in and just to clarify it. But the idea, Mr. Chair, in this one is, again, that you have a whole of government response to deal with these issues. Thank you.
Sorry, I was on mute. So seeing that no one else wishes to speak to this, we will go to a vote. Madam Clerk?
So the vote is on CPC 1. Mr. Baker,
Opposed.
Mr. Biddle,
Opposed.
Mr. Dong,
Opposed.
Mr. Saini,
Opposed.
Ms. Sachs,
Opposed.
Mr. Albus,
In favor.
Mr. Jennerer,
In favor.
Ms. McLeod,
In favor.
Mr. Redekop,
Yes.
Madame Michaud,
Contre.
Mr. Bacharach.
Opposed.
Okay, so there are 4 in favor and 7 opposed.
Okay, thank you. We go now to PV6, which has been deemed moved, but I invite Ms. May to speak to it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
But before sorry, one moment, Ms. May, just before we go to your comments, I'm told that if PV6 is adopted, PV7 and PV8 become moot, as they would be inconsistent with the decision on PV6. But go ahead, Ms. May.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think if there's there have been a number of consistent points raised by most of the witnesses from whom we've heard, and for those who have submitted written briefs and in public discussion of the weakness of the bill. And the first thing is, of course, that the first milestone year should be 2025, not 2030. That, of course, and I'm just going to explain the thinking process behind putting forward 3 amendments with declining ambition. That's because if you, as the Act is constructed, if we were to simply put in a milestone year at 2025 without embedding what that target would be, we would be creating a very, very steep hill to climb for the process of consultation that's embedded in the Act. I think that that's what created the impression for many that somehow or other, many within the government, that we couldn't actually have a milestone year before 2030, although the UK did immediately on passing their bill in 2008. Their first milestone year was 2013. The same, New Zealand just passed its act, as I mentioned, in 2020. First milestone year is 2025. But they'd chosen a different route with an expert scientific group to tell them what the target would be in 5 years' time. So the milestone years, and actually the Liberal platform led me to believe that this is what we would see, a first milestone year in 2025 and every 5 years thereafter. That's what's actually embedded in the COP21 decision document, that we would upgrade. Countries were certainly encouraged to improve their targets in 2020, their nationally determined contributions, and in the language of the COP21 decision document, every 5 years thereafter. In light of the structure of the whole Act, to make it somewhat process heavy to deliver a new target for a first milestone year in 2025, I want to suggest in these amendments, starting with Parti Vert 6, with the Green Party 6, that the target be embedded in the legislation. Now, there's even more support for this now than there was at first reading, because now we have the government accepting, as I understand it, that the target for 2030 is to be embedded in the legislation. The target for 2025 being embedded in the legislation is certainly a help. And I want to stress this point to members of the committee. We've already accepted in Article 14 of the Paris Agreement an obligation for a global progress report called a global stock take in 2023. Now, if we had a 2025 milestone year, as this amendment proposes, we would then be triggering the 2 years in advance. We have a progress report ready. That would fall on 2023, and then every 5 years thereafter, we would be right in sync with what we've agreed to do under the Paris Agreement with global stock takes at 5-year increments starting in 2023. So again, the first one of these starts with the notion that we would embed in legislation right now that by 2025, we would accept a target of 25% reductions below 2005 levels to be achieved by 2025. That's steep because we now know that the government is committing to somewhere between 40 and 45% below 2005 levels in 2030. But as a first attempt, and I'll speak to all three at once, Mr. Chair, just to avoid repetition, that in my first amendment, I propose, let's do the right thing. The United States is aiming for 50% reductions below 2005 by 2030. So a mid-decade checkpoint with teeth, more than what the NDP is proposing, not just a progress report, but actual milestone year for 2025 at 25% reductions. Feeling that there should be some room for flexibility here on what that target should be. My second amendment in this series, Green Party 7, said, okay, let's make it half of what you aim to do by 2030. We now know from the Prime Minister's improvement in our target, which is certainly welcome. It's not enough to meet the IPCC science, but it's far better to say that by 2030 we'll be 40 to 45% below 2005 levels. Well, if we have any hope of getting there, 40 to 45% below 2005 levels by 2030, surely we should be prepared to say our first milestone is 2025. Let's see if we've gotten to 20% below 2005 levels by 2025. That's the kind of heavy lifting we're going to need to do to meet the demands of this crisis. This is an emergency. And we have to, in COVID, we didn't say to Theresa Tam, I know you're telling us the science says stand 6 feet apart, we'll give you 3 feet. That should be good for you. That's our political interpretation of the science. So we actually have to adhere to the science, and we should be going much steeper than 40 to 45% below 2005 levels if we're serious about holding to 1.5 degrees. So a 20% milestone, 20% reductions against 2005 by 2025 is the second amendment. And if you want to go easy and think, okay, let's start slow. Let's just make sure we can hold our feet to the fire, see if this act is working, see if we're reducing emissions. Because so far, it's not just that we haven't ever met a target in Canada. We have gone directionally in the wrong direction against every target we've set. That's the more serious problem. So 15% below 2005 levels by 2025. These three amendments, any one of them will strengthen this act enormously. The best one, of course, is to go to 25% below 2005 levels with a milestone year in 2025. Again, this will be consistent with commitments we have already made for a global stock take in 2023 that will alert us in 2023 if we're on the right track to hold to our targets or not. The milestone year brings with it accountability. It brings with it a 2-year in advance review. It brings with it the possibility of the minister saying, okay, what we're doing isn't working. Let's get on it. So I urge this committee to consider any one of the three amendments, PV6, PV7, or PV8, but clearly PV6 is the one that your children would vote for if they were around this table.
Thank you, Ms. May. Madame Michaud.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président. Je veux juste...
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just want to say that I agree with the spirit of what Ms. May was saying in terms of introducing 2025 as a milestone year in the bill, but I'm going to have to vote against PV6 because we're ready to let the minister establish the target for 2025 in the plan. I also want to say we want 1990 as the benchmark year and the reference year rather than the 2005. Thank you. Mr. Albas?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and certainly just want to reply to MP May's suggestion here. I do believe that there is a huge value in accountability, but the fact remains is that this number has been picked, and again, we can agree, is the number too high or too low? We can have discussions over that, but ultimately, the government, if we simply give it a target that is not within reason and cannot be attained, then I think we are setting ourselves up for more failure, more cynicism. I'd much rather have where the government, can through, like I said earlier, a whole in government approach that may not be possible given the fact that we've one of our amendments was rejected, but where they discuss with the expert panel with Canadians and then post the target and then can be held accountable because it's something that they did in discussion with so many. And I just think that for us to be picking a number and then saying, here's the number outside of what has been committed to. For example, Mr. Chair, you certainly were there where Mr. Harper worked with his provincial counterparts, asked for their input as to what targets should be taken to the Paris Accord. What was taken to Paris there was the result of a government discussions between 10 provinces and the 3 territories and the federal government to come up with a national target that was taken there. For us simply just to put in, our own best guess as to how things will merit that, I just don't believe would be helpful. That being said, once the government announces it, it should work 100% towards those targets, something we just have not seen from this government yet. So while I'm not going to be supporting this, I hope my colleague Ms. May understands the place where I think it's just a disagreement about the number itself, and not that the government should not be taking action to work with industry, to work with other governments, to work with different stakeholders, to work with First Nations, on an achievable number that Canadians can count on. And then we can then, as parliamentarians, hold them accountable for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Albus. Seeing no further speakers, we can vote now on PV6. Madam Clerk. You're on mute, Madam Clerk.
Excuse me.
That's my job, to be on mute.
Mr. Baker.
Opposed.
Mr. Biddle.
Opposed.
Mr. Dung.
Opposed.
Mr. Saini.
Opposed.
Ms. Sachs.
Opposed.
Mr. Albus.
Opposed.
Mr. Genereux.
Opposed.
Ms. McLeod.
Opposed.
Mr. Reddecup.
Opposed.
Madame Posé.
Michaud.
Oh, excuse-moi, Michaud. Madame Michaud.
Contre, merci.
And Mr. Bacharach.
Opposed.
So that is 11 opposed.
On poursuit maintenant avec.
And now we'll continue with PV7. I imagine that Ms. May you've already discussed the issue of your amendment. Do you have anything to add? No. I just wanted to say I've already said my points. Green Party 8, 7, and 6 to assist the committee. Very well, so we can vote. Ms. Clerk?
Opposed.
Mr. Biddle.
Opposed.
Mr. Dong.
Opposed.
Mr. Saini.
Opposed.
Ms. Sachs.
Opposed.
Mr. Albus.
Opposed.
Mr. Genereux.
Opposed.
Ms. McLeod.
Opposed.
Mr. Reddecup.
Opposed.
Madame Michaud.
Contre.
And Mr. Bacharach.
Opposed.
So that is 11 opposed, 0 for.
D'accord. Alors, on passe maintenant.
Very well. Now we can move on to a vote on PV8.
Mr. Baker.
Opposed.
Mr. Biddle.
Opposed.
Mr. Dong.
Opposed.
Mr. Saini.
Opposed.
Ms. Sachs.
Opposed.
And Mr. Albus.
Opposed.
Mr. Genereux.
Opposed.
Ms. McLeod.
Opposed.
Mr. Reddecup.
Opposed.
Madame Michaud.
Contre.
And Mr. Bacharach.
Opposed.
Okay. That is 11 opposed, 0 for.
D'accord, merci. Alors, on.
Very well, thank you. And now we are at CPC 2. I must note that if we adopt CPC 2, BQ 7 and G3 cannot be adopted because they seek to amend the same lines. Mr. Albas, you have the floor to speak to your amendment.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I certainly appreciate the opportunity to put this forward and to have it debated and see where other individuals on this committee are coming from. Similar to what I said earlier, is that climate change is a very real phenomenon, one that requires everyone to do their part, from the individual to their community to their province and all the way up to the federal government and everything in between. And so this is one of the reasons why we believe that the governor and council or cabinet should ratify before these targets go out, so that they are subject to, as we know, cabinets, Mr. Chair, are not all equal. But one thing I think that every Canadian government from the founding of this country on has strived to do is to make sure that there's a wide variety of voices, whether that be regional or other criteria, Mr. Chair. And that's why we think that there is more buy-in when there is a whole of government approach, where when governor and council or cabinet ratifies something, that it is meaningful and that everyone around that table has their hand in it and will do their part to work towards it. So, Mr. Chair, beyond that, just again, this is something my leaders talked about, the need for action. They need to have individuals around the table that are informed and working together. That is something that we don't always see, and that's something that I think Canadians would like to see more of. So I would ask all members on the committee to consider this and to vote in favor of. Thank you.
I see no other hands up.
We're just digesting all
Your
the
microphone, Mr. Speaker, or Mr. Chair.
Just give them a little time, Mr. Chair.
Okay, yeah, I'll give everyone some time to digest Mr. Albas's pitch. I still don't see any speakers, Mr. Albas. So I think we'll go to the vote. So, Madam Clerk, if you could do a roll call vote.
Certainly. So on CPC 2, Mr. Baker.
A lot to digest, but I'm still opposed.
Mr. Biddle.
Opposed.
Mr. Dong.
Opposed.
Mr. Saini.
Opposed.
Ms. Sachs.
Opposed.
Mr. Albas.
Working on the Baker vote, but in favor.
Mr. Genereux.
Convince me, Mr. Chair, in favor.
Ms. McLeod.
In favor.
Mr. Redekop.
He had me at Mr. Chair. I'm in favor.
Madame Michaud.
Contre.
And Mr. Bacharach.
Opposed.
So that is 4 in favor and 7 opposed.
Okay, so that means we can discuss BQ7, if I'm not mistaken. Madame Michaud, est-ce que vous aimeriez?
Ms. Michaud, would you like to move your amendment? With pleasure, Chair. What we're proposing with this is that the new target for the Bloc Québécois, what we'd like to propose to the government, as I've already said earlier, is to use 1990 as our reference year instead of 2005, as the 27 countries of the EU do, and as Quebec is doing. We believe that the target range indicated earlier by the government, 40 to 45% of greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, is not sufficiently ambitious, and we think it's misleading because the 2005 reference year is used instead of 1990 levels. The European Union is targeting 55% based on 1990 levels. So what should be used as a target in the Act is 1990 levels, and Canada's ambitions must be at least equal to those of Quebec and that 37.5% below 1990 levels. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Michaud. Mr. Albas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question and then a comment for the member Perhaps you might want to answer the question first, just because I want to understand this. First of all, I raised earlier the challenge that many are having in terms of regulatory certainty and the ongoing, it seems, dance between where governments keep changing and keep moving the goalposts, and how difficult that can be, particularly for industry. Obviously, there's more to Canadian society than industry, but it is an important part because they do employ a lot. And I would just simply ask, as I mentioned earlier, there was a long and arduous process that was taken to Paris, and the province of Quebec, like every other province, presented its goals and what it felt was doable. Has the member, sought the advice of the government of Quebec in regards of setting this goal that she's wanting us to embed in legislation?
Est-ce que Madame Michaud veut répondre?
Ms. Michaud, would you like to respond? I can respond. When we were targeting the targets, and we heard the witnesses with the minister, they agreed that in terms of transparency and collaboration with the other Paris Agreement signatories, he would agree to use the 1990 levels. And I think that's a valid argument in and of itself. And I think the 55% is what the EU is targeting. So to ask Canada for 37.5% seems quite reasonable to me. That's what Quebec is doing. We know that Quebec is a good player when it comes to greenhouse gas reductions, and Canada should look to us as an example. So it seems very reasonable to set this target. Does that answer your question, Mr. Albas? Mr. Bachrach?
Well, no, if I could just respond, I appreciate that, this member has done a lot in sharing her views in the House of Commons. She's presented a bill on it, so I respect her work and her sincerity on this. But I did specifically ask about the province of Quebec, and I have respect for all provinces. But it's one of those things where, if we're expecting, this to be a whole of government approach federally, but also that the provinces have their part, I think that we should be talking to them because they, I would imagine, would be included when we set these national targets.
Thank you, Mr. Bachrach.
Yeah, I appreciate the amendment. I can't support it mostly because I think that putting the target itself into the language of the bill would mean that to change the target, the bill would have to be amended, which I think adds a certain amount of uncertainty and obviously time to that process. I note that the 2030 target is intended to be reviewed in 2025. So I think the intention is to create the framework within the bill for the setting of the target, but not to embed the target itself in the language of the bill.
Okay, merci, Monsieur Redekop.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kind of further along those lines, if we as parliamentarians are going to embed a number into the bill, I'd like to know if it's achievable. And so maybe for the witnesses, Mr. Moffat, perhaps, could you maybe inform the committee, is 37.5% attainable? Do you have any studies or any knowledge to suggest that that's too low, too high, or right where it should be? What does the department have to say about that?
Mr. Moffat, are you able to answer that question? You're on mute. I think. Was it for Mr. Moffat, Mr. Redekop? Yeah, I heard his name.
Yes.
Sure. So the government released modeling with the Strength and Climate Plan in December, which showed that the measures in the Strength and Climate Plan on their own would, on top of the already implemented measures, would achieve 31%. That is without any additional provincial, territorial, or business action. And then in the 2021 budget, additional programmatic and tax measures were announced, and the government indicated that with the addition of those measures and based on ongoing discussions with the United States, that existing measures would achieve 36%. And therefore, as Minister Wilkinson explained in his testimony to this committee, it was it's the government's view that a target well above 36% in the range of 40 to 45% would be attainable given the opportunity for innovation and the development of additional policy measures over the next decade.
And just, Mr. Malva, just to clarify, are you talking about 2005 as the baseline or 1990? Because this specific question here is about 1990, and I think that's where I'm just trying to put those two numbers together. If to use the 36% number, for example, I believe that was on 2005 baseline. And so if we were to adjust that to a 1990 baseline, what is the equivalent number? Do you have that information?
Apologies, I didn't address that issue, and I don't know that I have it right now. I apologize.
Okay.
Maybe just for the benefit of the committee, do you have any idea, like any approximation of what the difference is from 90 to 2005?
I'd rather not speculate. I apologize.
Okay. Madame Michaud, est-ce que votre main est levée de nouveau ou est-ce que c'est...
Madame Michaud, was your hand up again? Yes, yes. Go ahead. I just wanted to answer the question about whether or not it was feasible. Well, clearly, yes. If Canada will stop subsidizing and funding the increased greenhouse gas emissions, and which it's doing by continuing to subsidize the most highly polluting industries, including the oil and gas industries. And to respond to Mr. Bacharach's comments, I think that this is the very essence of this legislation to include a target. Reducing greenhouse gases for the 2030 target is our main target, and the government has committed to including the target in the Act. If you look at the amendments that are coming up, I understand that this is not going to be the case. The government's not going to keep their word. So I want to have something that's respectable for a country like Canada. And we need to have a target that is achievable and respectable and realizable in this kind of bill. So that's why I think it's completely feasible to include this target in the Act. Thank you. I don't see any other hands up. We can vote. I'd like to point out that if we adopt BQ7, we cannot deal with G3 because, as I've already mentioned, the two amendments speak to the same line. So can we move to the recorded division, please, clerk?
Oui, bien sûr.
Yes, of course.
BQ7.
BQ7? Yes, BQ7.
Je suis contre.
Monsieur Biddle.
Opposed.
Monsieur Dong.
Opposed.
Monsieur Saini.
Opposed.
Madame Sachs.
Opposed.
Mr. Albus. Mr. Albus.
Opposed.
Monsieur Jenner.
Opposed.
Madame McLeod.
Opposed.
Monsieur Redekop.
Opposed.
Madame Michaud.
En faveur.
Et Monsieur Bacharach.
Opposed.
Ça, c'est 1 pour et 10 contre.
I thought we could break for a good 7 minutes. It would take us to 6:03. But in the interim, Madam Clerk, do we have any indication as to whether resource limitations allow us to go to 8, or do we have to stop before 8? Have you been able to find out if how whether we can make it to 8 or not? And if not, perhaps during the break we could check. But did you get any information on that?
I haven't had any response to my request in the negative or the positive, so I will confirm.
Okay, so we'll see everybody back here.
Mr. Chair, could we round it up to a nice even 10 minutes, please?
Sure. Okay. Yeah. 6:07. Is that good? Okay. We'll be right back.
To introduce a motion to add new subsections 7, 1.1, 2, and 3 to the Canadian Net Zero Emissions Accountability Act. On April 22nd, 2021, during the Leaders Summit on Climate organized by U.S. President Biden, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced that Canada will enhance its emissions reduction target under the Paris Agreement, known as a nationally determined contribution to 40 to 45% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions below 2005 levels by 2030. This motion strengthens the act by codifying the target announced in May of reducing Canada's GHG emissions to 40 to 45% below 2005 levels by 2030. Also, the importance of this amendment is that this motion also prevents backsliding on Canada's greenhouse gas emissions targets in providing that a target for a specific milestone year must represent a progression beyond the previous one and be as ambitious as Canada's most recent nationally determined contribution.
Merci, Monsieur Saini. Just pour...
Thank you, Mr. Saini. I would just like to point out to the committee members that if we adopt this amendment, number G3, then we will have to leave aside amendment BQ8 because the two amendments aim to amend the same line. Are there any speakers? Would any members like to speak to amendment G3? Mr. Albus, Ms. Michaud.
Okay, well, Madame Michaud.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to mention that in response to a question I asked of the Heritage Minister in the House of Commons, he answered that the government would include its new target in the legislation. And I asked the Minister of the Environment at this committee last week, and he answered that the government would include its new target in the legislation, in the Act. What I understand now is that they're not doing so. Today, the government has refused. The Bloc Québécois reached out to have a target included in relation to 1990 as a reference here, and we take due note of that. And we also note that the NDP said that it was of no point to include a target in this Act because Canada must, in any event, provide its nationally determined target and that there's no value added to this amendment. And I think that it's not so. It's a means that the government found not to include its own target in its own legislation, and I think it's disappointing. And in the archives of this committee, in fact, they're replacing an article, a clause that said that they would have an unknown target that would be included within 6 months, replaced by an article that says by November 2021, we will establish a target, regardless of which one it is. I find this highly disappointing that the government is not keeping its word and publicly, on 2 occasions, committed to do so, and this is the method they found to avoid doing so. Thank you, Ms. Michaud. Mr. Albus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to take a slightly different perspective than Madame Michaud, but I do appreciate her input on the subject. Let me first start with a question to Mr. Moffat. So in the first part of this amendment, 1.1, each greenhouse gas emissions target must represent a progression beyond the previous one. So the question I would have is, usually when you say we're going to reduce something by a certain time, one would expect that there be a logical progression. Is there anything specific in this particular part of the amendment that is not redundant?
I think it's our view that the amendment is not redundant in the sense that the bill requires setting multiple targets en route to 2050. And so there is nothing in the bill that, without this amendment, that requires that each successive target be more ambitious than the previous one.
Yeah, but without, the only kind of spikes I would imagine that we would see is from a technological shift where suddenly you would have a major drop. Is the government anticipating that there could be a sudden spike the other way?
I think this bill is, I'd remind members that the bill is primarily focused on political accountability and speaks to obligations of future governments, which would have discretion to set whatever target they chose, whatever interim target they chose. And this provision would require that each such target be more ambitious than the previous one, notwithstanding technology or production levels.
Okay, but what I would just simply say, Mr. Chair, is that I think most people would consider that if we are looking at net zero as being a fruitful goal, that there would be step-by-step processes to it, whether they be through technology or through some sort of regulatory tools that would encourage those emissions to move on a downward slope. But quite honestly, Mr. Chair, going back to my earlier discussion about Madame Michaud had mentioned the desire to have specific targets put into place here. That is one method of certainty. But what I would simply suggest, though, is that instead of picking, one particular target, there does seem to be in this particular motion that it gives more room for the government to keep moving the goalposts. For example, Mr. Chair, we've seen this minister under this minister, 3 different versions, of the carbon tax. Originally, under the previous Minister of the Environment, Catherine McKenna, there was, no, we're not going to be raising our carbon tax past 2019. It's going to stay at the $50 level that was agreed to by all provinces. Well, not all provinces. Many provinces actually either opposed it from the beginning, or one did from the beginning, and others dropped out of the program. But then the switch in the announcement of last year, and then again a switch again in the budget, and then a switch again. So our targets and our approach on carbon pricing is sure sending shockwaves of uncertainty. And so we won't be supporting this particular amendment, but we do agree that there should be some solid deliberation and that everyone should know what those targets are instead of a constantly moving target, which seems to be that this government continually does. Not sure why. Maybe it's to please some sort of electoral vote that they're seeking, rather than trying to get everyone to work together towards some common goals. So Conservatives, Mr. Chair, I hope you're not shocked, but we will not be supporting this one. We think, quite honestly, a lot of this is just prescriptive and gives the government more room to move around.
Madame Michaud,
Thank you, Ms. Michaud. Have you raised your hand again? Yes, I just wanted to ask for a clarification. Mr. Chair, you said that if G3 is adopted, then we cannot adopt BQ8. That's what I wanted to know.
Mr. Albus, can you take your hand, put your hand down, take your hand down?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I understand the spirit of this amendment correctly, in the unfortunate scenario that the government were to miss one of its targets, it would not lower its sights. It would commit to working harder and staying on path, or rather getting back on track towards the various targets it set. And the intention is that the pace of change accelerates over time. It doesn't decelerate, so that we're in good shape to hit those targets and get to where we need to be by 2050. So that's my interpretation of the progression beyond the previous one language.
Thanks. Yeah, no, go ahead if you haven't finished. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Maybe I would just ask Mr. Saini if that was the intention behind the amendment. That's my understanding.
Mr. Saini? I guess it's really Mr. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes, that's also is to prevent backsliding, but also in other cases, we've seen the same type of language used in Norway's Climate Change Act, in the UK Climate Change Act, and in New Zealand's Climate Change Act. So there is this progression to make sure that we're continually doing better, and we're being more ambitious than we were before.
Thank you, Mr. Redekop.
I just want to talk a little bit more about what Mr. Albus spoke of, and I want to remind you of Dr. Henry from the Chamber of Commerce in our discussion about moving a goalpost and changing a goalpost. And it's very important that business have some certainty in the emissions targets that we have. And my concern here is that this is going to allow the government and future governments to play around with those targets and move them around, which will cause great stress for businesses as they're trying to plan. I mean, he talked about the ripple effects, and we also spoke about that with Pulse Canada and how it affects our export markets as well. And so that would be my concern here, is that we're just opening up the door for additional targets, changes to the targets, which is going to create uncertainty, which is going to make it difficult for businesses as they try to invest and try to, they're aiming at this goal and all of a sudden it changes again. So that's my concern with this part of the change.
Okay, shall we vote on G3? Madam Clerk?
Yes, just one moment. So G3, Mr. Baker.
Favor.
Mr. Biddle.
In favor.
Mr. Down.
In favor.
Mr. Saini.
In favor.
Ms. Sachs.
Favor.
Thank you. Mr. Albus.
Opposed.
Mr. Genereux.
Opposed.
Ms. McLeod.
Opposed.
Mr. Reddecup.
Opposed.
Madame Michaud.
Contre.
Mr. Bacharach.
In favor.
So that is 6 in favor and 5 against.
Thank you. So BQ8 is off the table, and we go now to CPC3. And I should mention that if CPC3 is adopted, BQ9 cannot be moved as they amend the same line. Mr. Albus, would you like to move CPC3?
Mr. Chair, I think actually Ms. McLeod suggested that she was going to move.
Okay, fine. I just had your name next to it, but whatever.
Okay, no. Sorry, Mr. Chair. I'm just trying to find where we are here. No, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. This is my responsibility. Don't let me, pander it off to someone else. So,
okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, we are striving to make the process better. We believe that by having more views at cabinet, where everyone takes, a turn discussing it, and then deliberating, and then perhaps modifying, that there will be a better result. And this is something that I think that would improve the process greatly, and would ask all members to support a more all hands on deck from our federal cabinet when it comes to achieving net zero. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Seeing no one else, we'll go to the vote. Madam Clerk?
Yes, so CPC3, Mr. Baker.
Opposed.
Mr. Biddle.
Opposed.
Mr. Dong.
Opposed.
Mr. Saini.
Opposed.
Ms. Sachs.
Opposed.
Mr. Albus.
For.
Mr. Genereux.
In favor.
Ms. McLeod.
Favor.
Mr. Reddecup.
In favor.
Madame Michaud.
Non, là, c'est Madame Posé.
Oh, Madame Posé, excuse-moi.
Now it's Ms. Posé.
Donc, c'est contre.
Parfait, merci. And Mr. Bacharach.
Opposed.
Okay, so that is 4 in favor and 7 opposed.
Okay, so 4 in favor and 7 opposed. So we now go to BQ9, correct? Yeah. BQ9, if BQ9 is adopted, PV9 and G4 cannot be moved as they amend the same line. Madame Posé, c'est...
Ms. Posé, it's your amendment. Do you wish to move it? Yes, I move BQ9 simply because we are asking for it to be every 5 years. And what we're saying is it should be after 2025, because we should have done it last year if we want to have 5 years leading up to 2025. So that's why we put it in to have it after that of 2025, contrary to other amendments. In our case, it would be every 5 years.
Yeah.
Are there any other speakers? Yes, Mr. Albus.
Question maybe to the clerk in regards to this, and I think I have the idea, but I just want to have some confirmation. When you have the dueling banjo of amendments like these two particular ones where they're both seeking to amend the same one, how do you choose? Is it by which amendment was submitted first? Like as in, because one would have an advantage if you say, well, if we adopt this, then the other one isn't necessary. So
yes, it's first come, first served.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay. Shall we proceed to a vote?
Okay, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
So BQ9, Mr. Baker.
Opposed.
Mr. Biddle.
Opposed.
Mr. Dong.
Opposed.
Mr. Saini.
Opposed.
Ms. Sachs. Opposed. Mr. Albus.
Opposed.
Mr. Genova.
In favor?
Ms. McLeod.
Opposed.
Mr. Redekop.
Opposed.
Madame Posey.
En faveur.
And Mr. Bacharach.
Opposed.
Okay, so it's 2 in favor and 9 opposed.
Okay, so we go to PV9 now. It's already been deemed moved, and so I'm asking Ms. May if she would like to speak to it.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. Just parenthetically, because I didn't speak to the others, Mr. Saini's amendment, by the way, is consistent with the Paris Agreement, which already requires that anytime we put forward a new target, it ratchets up from the previous one. I'm certainly happy to see it in the Act, but I wanted to note that the Paris Agreement already does that. Changing targets and certainty and uncertainty, I just reflect on our history that when Stephen Harper was Prime Minister, he changed our target in 2006, in 2009, and in 2015. None of those occasions involved any parliamentary input or public consultation, and it was Canada's unique contribution to undermining the comparability of different targets that Canada in 2006 stopped using 1990 and interjected 2006 and then 2005, undermining the entire scheme of what was under development since when I started working on the negotiations of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change in 1990. It was the intention that we would always use a 1990 base year. I've heard that come up a few times, so just threw that out there. And I'm speaking briefly to this one because I'm so pleased to see that there is G4, which is a government amendment, which will achieve the same thing, which was recommended by West Coast Environmental Law and many other environmental law groups that appeared before the committee, to say that if we're looking at immediate ambition, net zero legislation should provide enough certainty and clarity regarding our mid and long-term targets that we plan ahead. And planning ahead would be to set greenhouse gas emission targets at least 10 years beforehand. And that's what PV9 achieves. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, and I should just mention that if PV9 is adopted, G4 can't be moved because, as you said, they're identical. And if PV9 is negative, so is G4 for the same reason. So I don't see any hands up. Mr. Albus.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And unfortunately, I wasn't quick enough on the uptake to talk about BQ9, but I will speak in regards to it as well as PV9. We believe that, quite honestly, that there needs to be a whole of government approach, and instead here, both of these amendments would be placed by the minister. We believe the minister plays a key role, but not the only role, and that's why Conservatives will not be supporting this particular amendment or the previous one. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So seeing no further hands, we'll go to a vote.
So PV9, Mr. Baker.
Opposed.
Mr. Biddle.
Opposed.
Mr. Dung.
No.
Mr. Saini.
Opposed.
Ms. Sachs. Opposed. Mr. Albus.
Opposed.
Mr. Geneva.
Opposed.
Ms. McLeod. Mr. Redekop,
Opposed.
Madame Posey,
En faveur.
and Mr. Bacharach.
Opposed.
Okay, so that is 1 in favor and 10 opposed.
So that means we skip over G4. Is that correct?
I don't believe so, Mr. Chair.
It says if PV9 is adopted, G4 cannot be moved. Okay, but PV9 is defeated.
Even though it's identical to the one you're about to pass. But
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to make that point of order that the committee has already decided that it would not change to 10 years. And so to me, it doesn't seem that we can now have the committee argue or debate over the exact same
That's right.
extension of time.
Yeah. So it says if PV9 is negative, so is G4 for the same reason. So I'm correct, Madame Tivierge, I'm correct that we now go straight to G5. Is that correct?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, that was not my understanding at all. So I just, maybe if we can just tap the brakes here and
sure.
Either go, we have 2 amendments that have identical wording. You know, my intention was to vote in favor of G4, assuming that if this one failed, that one would come forward. So I don't know if by unanimous consent, we can go back and have another crack at it, or if we can bring G4 forward. Boy, I say that 10 times. But I'll look to you for direction.
Well, I mean, I'll ask the clerk, but I think do you not need unanimous consent to reverse a vote?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, you do.
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
when I spoke to my amendment, and I apologize, may I have the floor to speak to my amendment after it's been defeated?
I have Mr. Baker first, so why don't we just go, and then yourself, and then Mr. Saini, just to maintain the order. Mr. Baker?
So, Chair, I think I respect you very much, but I didn't hear you say that if we voted down PV4, we couldn't adopt G4, or was it PV9? I'm sorry. I didn't hear you say that if we didn't adopt PV9, we couldn't consider G4.
I didn't say that. I don't, generally I read what's in front of me, but is that?
I heard that.
Okay, Ms. May?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I think legitimately there's some confusion around the table. My assumption in watching all of my colleagues vote against a motion that is identical to the one that the NDP and Liberals intended to vote for. I mean, obviously there's a certain amount of conversation that's happened, which I've not been privy since I'm not a member of the committee. But it seems clear to me that the government's intention, with enough support from people around the table, is to change clause 7 to make it at least 10 years in it before. And I think there was confusion as they voted down my amendment, which was identical. I was getting very concerned because I think the intention here is to pass G4. G4 hasn't come to a vote yet, and I think we should ask the clerks to reconsider whether the confusion around my amendment, it's certainly not my intention at all ever to get the Green Party logo on an amendment. I don't care.
Right.
But the point of this motion is, and the point of the effort of the committee is to improve the bill. And G4, as Green Party 9, will improve the bill.
Yeah, I sort of, I was getting a sense that there was some confusion and that people were voting the opposite of what I expected them to vote. But I'll have to ask. Maybe the legislative clerk. Is this an ironclad rule that because we've negative PV9, we cannot vote for G4? Is there any way?
Yes, because the committee has made a decision on an amendment that is identical to another one.
Yeah.
So.
And we need unanimous consent
yes.
Yes. And that's probably
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, sorry, I've got Mr. Saini, Ms. McLeod, Mr. Bacharach.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate the words of Ms. May and Mr. Baker. I think I was confused also. I didn't realize by voting down one would negate the other. So I don't know what we can do in this situation, but certainly wasn't, my intent to in any way blunt the sort of focus or the sort of spirit of what was happening. I was confused myself. I thought voting on PV9, but then having the opportunity to vote for GV4, but I was confused myself.
Ms. McLeod.
Thank you, Chair. And I believe you did outline what would happen if we voted, which one down. I'm wondering if how long it would take to check transcripts to make sure your instructions were clear. But certainly, I do recall some fairly specific instructions. Thank you.
Madam Clerk, is there any way to check this? I mean, on short notice, is there any way to check it after the meeting and come back to this? But I'll go now to sorry, did you say something?
Well, I was going to say the committee could have stood the clause, but now they've voted on it. They've made a decision. We can review the blues, but they won't be available probably for at least until sometime tomorrow.
And if we find that I didn't read that second part, would we be able to come back and vote on G4?
I would have to defer to the ledge clerks to see if G4 or this clause is consequential to other clauses.
Madame Thivierge, Maître Thivierge.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
So let's say, let's say that it was found upon looking at the blues that I did not read the second part that says if PV9 is negative, so is G4 for the same reason. If we found that I did not read that, can we come back and say, well, we can now vote on G4? I mean, this would be something we would do at the next meeting because we don't know the blues.
Okay, I might have a suggestion. If we could suspend for a few minutes, we could have a look on parallel view, and we would have the answer.
Okay,
Mr. Chair.
Sorry. Let me get through. Mr. Bachrach, Mr. Redekop, Madame Posey, and then we can break and look at the parallel view.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't think the issue was that you didn't mention it. It was more that we assumed that it was similar to the previous instructions, and we glossed over it in an effort to get to the vote. And people just missed it and didn't flag that it seemed contrary to our understanding of how things were going to move forward. So, if we can't have unanimous consent to redo the vote, and we can't move a motion with the same wording, I wonder if you would accept a motion from the floor with slightly different wording.
Interesting point. We'll ask.
Would that be in order?
We'll ask the legislative clerk, Madame Thivierge. Is that possible?
Yeah, it's possible, but we would have to see the motion.
Okay, well, perhaps we could recess while I provide the wording, but my intention then would be to bring forward a motion that replaces line 5 on page 4 with the following, quote, greenhouse gas emissions target at least 3,650 days before. Which I had to get out a calculator, but I think that's 10 years.
Okay.
Still the same.
Okay, then 9 years, 364 days. Like the will of the majority of the committee is clear in this case, and the will is being held back by, somewhat esoteric procedure. My sense is that we should find some way to have the will of the committee reflected in the legislation.
That's your wording that you're submitting while we break. Is that correct?
Well, I guess so. My question for you, Mr. Chair, and through you to the legislative experts, my question would be: if we replace 10 years with 3,650 days, is that substantively different enough to qualify as a as a different motion. And if it's not deemed to be different enough, then I would move that we use the words at least 9 years, 364 days.
Okay, let's break in. I'm going to consult the legislative clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before you do that, I do think it's important that you hear from all viewpoints before you decide, because eventually you're going to come to a ruling.
Yeah, but Ms. McLeod has already spoken. No, is your hand? That was
my hand has been up, sir.
No, Ms. McLeod. Ms. McLeod. Yeah. Okay. Good.
Point of order, Chair. I wonder if we can go on and suspend the committee for a few minutes, and then
I just want to regroup. Sorry, Mr.
Because I also have a couple of suggestions as well, but I can hold
nothing
hold on until we come back to.
Yeah, we can then break again. That's no problem. Okay, I'm just going to recess for a second. Thanks.
Thank you.
it can be fixed. One is to suggest to propose 9 years, 364 days, and that could be reversed at report stage in the House to 10 years. Or we can just move on, and again at report stage, we can reinstate 10 years. So, we'll go now to. I'll get through the speakers list. Yeah, I'll go through the speakers.
Quand est-ce que c'est mon tour?
Oui, j'arrive là.
Yeah, but it's for me, my turn. Yeah, but I'm getting there. There are lots of people on the list. I'll go through everybody. Everybody's going to get their turn. But I had to consult the legislative clerk. Mr. Albus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just, as a few things, as a parliamentarian, regardless had you said it or not, we all here understand the needs to follow parliamentary procedure. It's very easy at committee for anyone to be able to assert their rights. But when they do not, when they choose not, in this case, the committee chose clearly in a majority to vote against the previous one. We have had occasions, I know I've had it on whether it be this committee or on other committees, the exact same thing. And the idea is to stop vexatious, chasing around where the dog is chasing its own tail arguments, where someone says, well, you don't like 9 years? Great, we'll put forward 8 years and 364 days. Oh, you don't like that? Well, we'll do 9 years and 1 day. And that eats up committee time. Look, the committee clearly made a decision. All of us have our rights. We have a right to raise our concerns if we didn't use it, but it's on us. It's not on you as the chair. So my suggestion would be, Mr. Chair, as we move along, and again, members can assert their rights in the House of Commons. And if the majority of the House of Commons chooses to do that, then that's a conversation that members can make known. There can be debate around that. But Mr. Chair, let's work well. I have to say, I've served on some committees where we did not strike off well. This committee, even though the issues can be very tough and divisive, has been very productive, and we've kept things. We've directed ideas and policy. We've gotten political around ideas, but not on personalities. So please, Mr. Chair, I would just implore members that take this as a learning experience, move forward, assert your rights in the House of Commons, work with other members to correct what you think is wrong, but do not subject the committee, because it cuts both ways. If this happens again in the future, the shoe might be on the other foot, and I may want to move a motion to get around the spirit of the previous vote. I would hope that each one of you would remind me and say, there's a reason why we have these rules. Partly it's to protect the process from, again, becoming a dog chasing its own tail scenario, Mr. Chair, where it's more vexatious and spinning around and around. Thank you.
Right, yeah. I mean, the rules allow for a vote to change with unanimous consent, but anyway.
Yeah, but again, no one's asked for that.
Well,
I would say it's probably not going to be coming, but at the same token, Mr. Chair, that you've already deliberated other ideas, and this is how we work as a committee, by discussing options and then moving forward.
Okay, Mr. Bachrach.
Well, I think it's about trying to move forward in the spirit.
Je m'excuse, Monsieur le Président.
Pardon, order, please. Excuse me.
Okay, my system, it shows a different order, but if Madame Posé is next, by all means. It's my system. I don't know why.
I'm fine with her going first. I do believe.
No, allez-y, Madame Posé.
Go ahead, Madame Posé. Thank you. I wanted to emphasize the fact that before the break, Mr. Bachrach had the right to speak, and I had been waiting. So anyhow, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Bachrach, and thank you, Chair. Now, I have to tell you that I am I'm surprised by the PV9 vote, because it says the same thing. So why? Is this an ideological reason that people didn't want to vote on the Greens but are ready to vote on the governments? I'm wondering. Also, if I read it, the national greenhouse gas emissions target at least 10 years before the milestone year. But the milestone year is on page 2 of the definitions. And on page 2 of the definitions, it says that the milestone year is 2030. Which means if we say 10 years before the beginning of the milestone year, it means that we would have had to vote for this in 2020, but it's now 2021. So it doesn't make any sense right off the bat. Now, you voted against BQ9, where the solution was in that, because we wanted to propose 2025. But in BQ9, it was subsequent years, at least 5 years before. So, in other words, at least 5 years after the milestone year. So, in the current framework, I would say this doesn't make any sense. BV9 and G4 make no sense. We should have provided targets in 2020. So, look, we want a milestone year in 2025, because the way we're going now, nothing is going to happen before 2025. Mr. Bachrach. Madam Posey, could you lower your hand, please? Mr. Bachrach.
I agree with some of what Madam Posey just said. I think that our goal at this point is to move forward together in the spirit of cooperation, recognizing that we still have a lot of amendments to get through. And I do believe, in reference to Mr. Albus's point, that there's a difference between obstructing a committee's work using the rules of procedure and people making an honest misinterpretation of the procedure, and that we should have the will of the committee heard. The alternative is that we amend it at report stage, which is going to take the time of everyone in the House, and I think it would be much more efficient for us simply to deal with it here. So I will make an amendment from the floor that Bill C-12 in Clause 7 be amended by replacing line 5 on page 4 with the following, quote, greenhouse gas emissions target at least 9 years, 366 days before, end quote.
Okay, just a moment, please.
Point of order, Chair. Since we're waiting, I wonder if I can talk to Mr. Bachrach with your permission. Just something very simple, like instead of 9 years, 366, would you consider, make it like 10 years plus 1 day? Would that be easier for public to consume?
Well, I guess if I would have thought about that, then that would have achieved the same thing. But I worry now that we're starting to split hairs.
As the chair's away, I'm assuming the chair,
isn't the right
and
word.
I would just ask all members just to wait until the chair returns. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Albus.
Thank you.
Okay. Chair Albus, rather.
Thank you. We'll just let the chair
Right
wait before we go.
Okay, so I'm told we have to, if we want to get it back to 10 years in report stage, we have to adopt, Mr. Back, we have to adopt something like 9 years, 364 days. In other words, we have to have something that we can amend back to 10 years. So, Mr. Bachrach, that's your proposal, I believe.
That's correct, and
Okay.
I've now made that amendment. So.
Okay, so
And
we're going to
it's
debate your
9
amendment.
years, 9 years, 366 days.
Yeah, and we're going to debate that amendment and vote on it, and then we'll continue with the speakers list. So does anyone want to? Just a second now. Does anyone want to speak to Mr. Bachrach's amendment? Mr. Baker, do you want to speak to the amendment? Okay, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. I think I wanted to briefly say that, like I think that this is a really important issue, and I'm glad we're spending the time on it to ensure that the bill reflects the will of the committee. I mean, to ultimately reach net zero by 2050, this and I think future governments will need to take action to reduce to reduce emissions urgently in the short term, but also take steps many years in advance to allow us to achieve the necessary emission reductions in the medium and long term. And so the G4 amendment, or what Mr. Bachrach has now proposed, which is, changes the time period by a day, would ensure that greenhouse gas emissions targets after 2030 have to be set at least 10 years, or in this case, 10 years and 1 day in advance, instead of 5 years in advance, as is currently provided by the bill. And I think this would ensure that the government starts planning for future targets and taking action further in advance, and actually would also provide greater certainty for others who also need to plan. It also aligns with Canada's current practice under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So I support what Mr. Bachrach is proposing, and I hope the committee members.
Ms. May, do you want to speak on this particular amendment? Because if it's on something else, we'll have to.
No,
come
I
back
wouldn't.
to
I wouldn't try to speak on anything else. And it's in with, and because my amendment was identical, I think I'm within the ambit of the motion this committee passed to point out that neither my amendment nor Mr. Baker's amendment nor Mr. Bachrach's amended version have the problem that my friend Monique Posey suggested they might have. You need to look at the previous sections to realize that in talking about subsequent national greenhouse gas targets, we're referring subsequent to the 2030 target. So it does not have the problem of creating a prehistorical imperative to have done something that can't be done because of the timing. It's talking specifically, starting with subsection 4, we're talking specifically about subsequent milestone years. Milestone years are defined at not in a hypothetical way, but specifically 2030. So we're now talking subsequent 2035, 2040, 2045. I'm not trying to amend Mr. Bachrach's motion. I would have done it differently. I would have said the subsequent milestone year must be defined in 2025, et cetera, et cetera. But it's good enough to go ahead procedurally. I just didn't want people to worry that we were creating an impossibility by passing a motion now, fixing it at report stage, that would require the government to have access to a Back to the Future kind of time machine.
Thanks for that clarification, Ms. May. Now, Madam, I think, Madam Clerk, is it possible for you or somebody else, when somebody's spoken, to take their hand down if they don't take it down immediately? Because I'm not sure if Madame Posey is coming back with a new, or if that's an old yellow hand. Or is it possible to control that from where you are, Madam Clerk?
Yes, I can do that.
Yeah, because otherwise, I don't know if it's an old hand or a new hand. And Madame Posey, est-ce que c'est une nouvelle intervention?
Ms. Posey, do you want to speak again, or was that an old hand? You're on mute, ma'am. No, I had raised my hand, Mr. Chair. However, finally, Ms. May explained it well. That's the issue. I had the impression that what I said wasn't understood. We were voting for something for 2030 that's already in the legislation, and then we're voting something where the target has to be established 10 years earlier, but it would have had to be established in 2020. Yes, but Ms. May gave a clarification on that. Thank you, Ms. May. Mr. Albas, is it to the amendment of Mr. Bachrach? Perfect, go ahead.
I'd actually find it easier if we just pull down our yellow hands ourselves, because then we're responsible for it, because this could cause all sorts of issues back and forth. When I try and click it off, someone else clicks it back on. But getting to the matter at hand, Mr. Chair. So first of all, I have to say, look, making this in order which is substantially the same business that went prior. And again, I'm not casting stones that I don't believe are warranted, Mr. Speaker or Mr. Chair, but I can't believe that we're entertaining this. First of all, for two reasons. First of all, there's just the premise of it. The reason why the rules are done this way is so that there's certainty that everyone will have process, and that if you fail on one measure, that another party can't just steal the same measure and then vote for it. Ms. May got her amendment prior to the government. She was organized, she had it forward, and the government obviously thought at one point it was a good idea. But again, that's how the process is. So I don't know if the NDP and the Liberals had some sort of plan here that they would vote it down. But if they did side together on voted it down and they're playing the game, then this is the natural result. And they should know better. And so, Mr. Chair, I would say this. You've already said to everyone that we're going to have to do this in the House of Commons later and debate over this.
It can be done. It can be done. But only it can be done. It's not up to me, but it can be done. And it can only be done if Mr. Bachrach's present motion, which is 9 years and 364 days, is adopted. Then that can be changed to 10 years. But if we don't adopt Mr. Bachrach's motion, then we can't just add 10 years, at report stage.
Wow. So we're going to have the same amount of work. But I would just say, Mr. Chair, is that this cuts both ways. And this confuses things. And to me, I'm not in opposition of democratic principles, but I believe that if you have some, you have to maintain them and show respect for all sides, that the rules will be maintained. And unfortunately, Mr. Bachrach might find that it's just inconvenient. But hey, if the dog eats your homework and you can just simply ask, to have that revised and do a do-over, I guess that's something that can be done. But I don't believe this is the proper process, Mr. Chair. And I believe that if Liberal members and the NDP had wanted to see 10 years, they would have supported Elizabeth May's motion on this. They would have just simply said, hey, let's get it in the bill. Who cares who gets the credit? I don't think, Miss May would have substantially run around saying, look at me, look at what I did. I think she would understand quite clearly that the committee decided to make an amendment to the bill, regardless of how my party or others voted. So, Mr. Chair, I have to say that I'm deeply disappointed in today's process. I will try to get over it. I believe me, I will not be going home and brooding over this. But I do think that members, by being cute and look, three lefts may make a right. It doesn't mean that it is the right thing to do. I would say that instead, next time, vote for the First Amendment that supports what you think is important for the bill, rather than going along partisan lines.
Noted. Mr. Redekop, is it on the amendment?
Yes, it is. And to my friend, Mr. Albus, it's two rights that makes a left, or two lefts make a right, whatever. Just maybe a process explanation for my benefit. So I'm sure there's something in the rules that talk about something being substantially the same. So if you say 9 years and 365 or 366 days, that's substantially the same as saying 10 years. Is that just something that the clerks have to recommend, or is that something that you as chair make that call? That's something I'm not really clear on in my mind.
Well, they advised me, that the legislative clerks advised me that someone can make an amendment that is 9 years, 366 days, or 364 days, whatever, and that is that can be considered as an amendment and voted on, and at report stage. The House can decide, well, that doesn't really make a lot of sense, so we're going to bring it back to 10 years. So that's what I've been told by the legislative clerks.
And the clerks would confirm that is not substantially the same?
Well, they confirmed that it can be done. I mean, so you can ask them if you want, but that's what they've told me every time we've paused to discuss it. So I guess okay. What I'll ask Mr. Bachrach, because I want to make sure I'm not confused about whether it's 364 or 366. So, Mr. Bachrach, could you read?
It's 366 as I read. But if I may, Mr. Chair, I think that Mr. Albus's point is well taken, and I stand properly chagrined for not having hit the brakes and clarified the rules I think all of us have learned something about a fairly esoteric aspect of this procedure. But the goal here really is to not let the procedure stand in the way of the will of the committee. And it does feel that if we were to simply move on, I would point out that G5 requires us to vote on G4. If we don't adopt G4 or something along those lines, then G5 no longer makes any sense. So it is important that we deal with this, and I appreciate the time that the other members of the committee have given to this. I think the majority of the committee feels that this is an important aspect of the bill and would like to see it adopted.
Okay. Can you just read your amendment? The amendment you're proposing, can you just read it?
Sure. Greenhouse gas emissions target of at least 9 years, 366 days before.
Okay, so we're all on the same page. We'll go now to a vote. Madam Clerk, if you could call the names.
Certainly. So Mr. Baker.
In favor.
Excuse me, I've lost my, okay.
I'm forgettable.
Sorry. Mr. Biddle.
In favor.
Mr. Drouin.
En faveur.
Mr. Saini.
In favor.
Ms. Sachs.
Favor.
Mr. Albus.
Opposed.
Mr. Genereux.
Opposed.
Ms. McLeod.
Opposed.
Mr. Redekop.
Opposed.
Madame Posey.
Contre.
And Mr. Bacharach.
In favor.
So that is 6 in favor and 5 against.
Okay, so it's adopted. So we'll go now to G5. Mr. Baker.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm introducing this motion to add a new subsection 7.5. This motion it's complementary to the one that requires targets to be set, the one that we just passed that requires targets to be set 10 years in advance, or now 10 years a day in advance. It requires the Minister of the Environment to publish within a year of setting the target for the 2035, 2040, or 2045 year, a high-level description of the key emissions reductions measures to achieve that target, as well as the latest projections of the greenhouse gas emissions. So this motion will, for example, ensure that the target set for 2035 in 2025 is accompanied by the high-level description of the measures and projections to reach the 2035 target. So basically, this would ensure that future governments not only set targets in advance, but publish public plans that they can be held accountable for achieving those targets.
So would anyone else like to speak to this this amendment? Mr. Albus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to ask Mr. Moffat a question. Isn't a lot of this material already made public through other reporting mechanisms?
That it's correct that some of the that we have obligations under the UNFCCC and under the Canadian Environmental Protection Act that result in various reports. There are no such regular requirements for plans that as contemplated by this this provision or the act as a whole, however.
So ultimately, would you say most of the material that would be captured by this is already publicly available, but just would be packaged so that average Canadian would be able to see it in one source? Or does this substantially increase the transparency? Just looking for a little, are we talking 90% of this is publicly available, 80%?
At the moment, we don't have anything like this particular provision where there would be an obligation 9 years in advance of a target to publish a high-level description of the kind of overall approach that the government intends to take to achieve that next target.
How much prescription is in a high level? Like, what does high level mean?
Well, the amendment that's been proposed describes high level as something that is similar to Canada's nationally determined contribution. There is guidance under the United Nations Framework Convention about what a nationally determined contribution submission should include. So it's considerably more than a number. I can't recall the exact number of pages, but our most recent nationally determined contribution, Mr. Nevison may be able to correct me, was kind of in the 5 to 10 page range of information.
Okay, well, it seems to me, Mr. Chair, that a lot of this information is already publicly reported. I'll leave it to individual members to decide if there's actual value on this. I get the sense, though, that this is the government trying, because as MP General had cited a number of times, people just didn't seem to be responding to the bill, and so I think they're just trying to say, look, we're beefing it up. I don't know. I'll leave it to the individual groups and individuals across Canada to decide if this is actually a meaningful measure or not. Conservatives will be voting against this because we don't think that there is a great deal of extra value being generated by this amendment.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? No, Mr. Albus, can you take your hand down? No, thanks. Okay, so we'll call the vote.
Yes. So on G5, Mr. Baker.
In favor.
Mr. Biddle.
In favor.
Mr. Drouin.
En faveur.
Mr. Saini.
In favor.
Madam Sachs.
In favor.
Mr. Albus.
Against.
Mr. Genereux.
Opposed.
Ms. McLeod.
Opposed.
Mr. Redekop.
No.
Madam Posey.
En faveur.
And Mr. Bacharach.
In favor.
So that is 7 in favor, 4 against.
Okay, so it carries. Now we have to vote on clause 7 as amended. Anyone have anything to say? Can we do the roll call, Madam Clerk?
Certainly. So clause 7 as amended, Mr. Baker.
In favor.
Mr. Biddle.
In favor.
Mr. Drouin.
En faveur.
Mr. Saini.
In favor.
Ms. Sachs.
In favor.
Mr. Albus.
Opposed.
Mr. Genereux.
Opposed.
Ms. McLeod.
Opposed.
Mr. Redekop.
Opposed.
Madam Posey.
Contre.
Mr. Bacharach.
In favor.
Okay, so that is 6 in favor, 5 against.
Okay, merci. Alors,
Thank you. So section 7 is carried. I've just noticed that Mr. Drouin is with us. Welcome, Mr. Drouin, to the Environment Committee. So we shall continue with section 8, clause 8, and with CPC 4, the amendment. And I would like to mention that if CPC 4 is carried, then PV 10 and G6 cannot be considered because those other two, PV 10 and G6, aim to amend the same line as CPC 4. So is it Mr. Albus who is going to move CPC 4? Over to you, Mr. Albus.
procedural point.
Yes.
Under the terms of the motion that the committee passed, I just want to make it clear that the custom in other committees is that I'm allowed to speak to my amendment, even though it would be negative if something was passed in advance. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Could you? I'm not sure I follow. So you after 7 is adopted, you're saying that you have.
I have an affirmative right to speak to every amendment in a way that committee members aren't, because I'm required to be here by the motion passed by committee, and I have a right to speak to each one of my amendments, even if they are out of order.
Okay, but are you talking about going forward? I mean, you've been speaking on your amendments, no?
Yes, but if we were getting to, as we get to Parti de 10, that's all. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Mr. Chair, just a point of order. When you were describing all the things that were happening, there was something wrong with my microphone, with my earphone. It was very fuzzy. I was wondering if you could just say that again, so I could just be clear this time.
Sure. I'm having a lot of trouble with this technology. I don't know who's next, but anyway.
Who you say should go next, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, but I'm trying to be fair. So going back to what I said, Mr. Saini, if CPC4 is adopted, PV10 and G6 cannot be moved as they amend the same line. Does that clarify, I think? Yeah, okay. So I have the order I have here is Mr. Albas and Ms. Sachs. If that's not correct, let me know, but go ahead, Mr. Albas.
Yes, thank you. I'm sure if MP Sachs has a point of order, she would just simply voice that, and then I would let her assume the floor. So in CPC 4, again, let me just read it because it's so short, that the governor and council must take into account the best scientific information. So what this is, again, Mr. Chair, is just a different approach than what is offered in C12 thus far, is that it's the cabinet itself must take into account that information, that one minister, as important as the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change is, which I would also mind that the government has created flexibility that they could appoint a different minister if they want. Maybe they might want to speak exactly why they might switch that. But ultimately, we believe that in order to best tackle climate change, it's important to have all hands on deck, and having the cabinet itself, the governor and council is its formal name, to take into account the best scientific information when they are going about what is envisioned in Clause 8, I think would be a very good approach, and I would encourage all honorable members to support this approach, even just once say yes.
Okay, Madam Ms. Sachs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will speak to Mr. Albas's amendment in a way to kind of ensure that we don't have the inside baseball situation that we had the last time. My understanding is that on one hand, if we were to vote in favor of CPC 4, it would then take out PV10 and G6.
That's right.
However, if we opposed it and then went on to PV10 and opposed PV10, would that then, or what would happen to G6 is my question. I don't want the same situation. I'm a chess player. I'll admit it, and I just don't want us getting into the same difficulty that we had before, and want to make sure there is absolute clarity of all the members of the committee of the consequences of each step going forward. So they are interrelated.
Right. So if CPC 4 is adopted, PV10 and G6 cannot be moved. Okay. So let's assume, let's say CPC 4 is not adopted. We go to PV10. If PV10 is adopted, G6 and CPC 5 cannot be moved as they amend the same line.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the clarity.
Okay, Madam Posey.
Yes, but I disagree, Mr. Chair, with your interpretation. I feel that if we were to vote in favor of CPC 4, we could also vote for PV10, because PV10 does not amend the word minister. It's the verb based on, rather than take into account, it's to amend based on the best scientific data. So if we accepted CPC4, it would be the governing council, but then we would have to vote on whether it's based on or as the legislation takes into account. So if we vote for CPC4, I don't see how that would cancel PV10. I shall ask Maître Tivierge if she would like to speak to this. Yes, as a matter of fact, one line may not be amended more than once. So even if the same word is not aimed at, once a line has been amended, it cannot be re-amended. Thank you, Ms. Tivierge. I hope that answers your question. So there are no, Ms. Posey, so there are no other speakers. So we may proceed with the vote on CPC 4. Madam Clerk, would you be kind enough to proceed with the vote?
Sorry, Madam Clerk, can you just repeat what we're voting?
Amendment CPC 4.
The one you want to support, Baker.
Okay, so despite Mr. Albus's advocacy, I'm going to vote against.
Mr. Biddle.
He was, it did seem like a good argument, but I will also be opposed.
Mr. Drouin.
Contre.
Mr. Saini.
Against.
Ms. Sachs.
It's nothing personal to Mr. Albus, but no.
Okay, Mr. Albus.
4, please.
Mr. Généreux.
In favor.
Ms. McLeod.
4, please.
Mr. Redekop.
Support.
Madame Posey.
Contre.
Mr. Bacharach.
I'm opposed.
So there's 4 in favor, 7 against.
Okay, so we now can consider PV10, Ms. May. Now, if PV10, I'll just repeat just so that we're, if PV10 is adopted, G6 and CPC5 cannot be moved.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. May.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With all due respect to all members, I'm just going to repeat again that this is an issue unlike others. If it's like anything, it's more like COVID. The science has to dictate our actions. The political targets aren't political. Failure isn't an option. If we fail to achieve what we committed to do, which is to hold to a livable world, humans, and this is not rhetorical language, this is scientific reality, that this is an existential threat to our civilization. If we get it wrong, there are no do-overs. If we get it wrong, there'll be nobody around to write the history books to tell us how badly we've done here. We actually have to adhere to the science. So the notion that in setting a target, the minister must only take into account the best scientific information available is an abomination. The minister must base the target on the best scientific information available. As I said, we didn't say to Theresa Tam, sorry, Doc, you want us to stand 6 feet apart? We'll give you 3. That's more than the Conservatives would give you. That's not an answer. And sorry for the little to my friend Dan and others. I mean, that seems to be the prevailing approach to that's the bar. We have to do this for the purpose of an election. No, we have to get this right under the terms of the science. And I can promise you, the atmosphere is not interested in negotiating with humanity. We are not in the driver's seat here, except to control our own actions. And we know very clearly that holding to 1.5 degrees is not easy. It will require much more of us than we currently are contemplating. But to have a target that is taking into account the best scientific information available was found by many of our witnesses. We didn't have that many, but certainly the climate action groups, the West Coast Environmental Law specifically said, quote, to best ensure the targets and plans are based on science and independent expert advice, climate accountability legislation should ensure that targets and plans are based on the best scientific information. Now, I recognize that there is a line conflict and that this has been noticed by other members of the committee. It is possible to amend at this point, but not later, to amend PV10 such that it can be very easily folded into G6, but that would require someone other than me. I'm not allowed to amend my own motions, my own amendments. Someone else could, but it would certainly make sense to say the minister must base the target on the best scientific information available in G6, and then subclauses B, C, D, and the minister must take into account the other factors. But clearly our targets must be based on what science demands we do. It's not just a factor out there to be taken into account. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Bachrach.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I do think, and just following on what Ms. May has said, and I take her point, that the advantage of G6 is the inclusion of Indigenous knowledge and the importance of that. And we certainly, I think as a committee, all appreciate how important it is that the bill include reference to that in a meaningful way. So, I certainly take her point. I'm a bit worried that we would end up in some of the procedural weeds that we just got out of if we're mixing and matching. So I'm going to support G6, and for that reason, I regrettably won't be supporting this amendment. Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no more speakers, we'll vote on PV10. Madam Clerk.
Yes. So, Mr. Baker.
Mr. Baker.
Opposed.
Mr.
Sorry, I was on mute there. Sorry.
Mr. Biddle.
Opposed.
Mr. Durin. Monsieur Durin.
Contre.
Mr. Saini.
Opposed.
Ms. Sachs. Opposed. Mr. Albus.
Against, please.
Mr. Genereux.
Against.
Ms. McLeod.
Opposed.
Mr. Redekop.
Nope.
Madame Posey.
Pour.
And Mr. Bacharach.
Opposed.
Okay. So that is 1 in favor, 10 opposed.
Okay, so we go now to G6. Before I ask Mr. Saini if he wants to move the amendment, I'll let the committee know that if G6 is adopted, CPC 5 cannot be moved as they amend the same line. Mr. Saini, do you want to move G6?
Yes, I'd like to move G6, please.
The floor is yours.
It just, this motion will ensure that the minister takes into account other factors, including this Indigenous knowledge and submissions and advice provided by the advisory body when setting the greenhouse gas emissions target. It again strengthens the act by requiring the minister to consider additional factors with best scientific information available and international commitments with respect to climate change.
Thank you. Ms. McLeod. Oh, do you want to speak? Well, you've spoken to it. Okay, Ms. McLeod.
Thank you, and I suspect that this will pass and I won't get an opportunity to speak to how we could have made this section more comprehensive with a lot of the witnesses supporting that particular position. But I find it interesting that the government has put Indigenous knowledge into this section when they actually had no pre-conversations prior to tabling this legislation. There was no witnesses, Indigenous witnesses that represented the different groups. So again, the symbolism, the continued symbolism as opposed to the actual real process is a concern. And, certainly we do believe that better decisions would be made in this section if we included understanding the impacts. It doesn't mean that you don't move forward with the best scientific advice, but this section will lack an understanding that even your minister talked to being important. And again, we learned with the plastics ban that there was no sort of assessment of what the impact was going to be. So I think part of this addition was, okay, part of it was done without appropriate consultation, and it's missing a lot of things that might be important. So we will not be supporting, or at least I won't be. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can you take your hand down, Ms. McLeod? Seeing no more members who would like to speak to this, we'll go to the vote. Madam Clerk?
Yes, so G6, Mr. Baker.
In favor.
Mr. Biddle.
In favor.
Monsieur Dorin.
En faveur.
Mr. Saini.
In favor.
Ms. Sachs.
In favor.
Mr. Albus.
Opposed.
Mr. Genereux.
Opposed.
Ms. McLeod.
Opposed.
Mr. Redekop.
Opposed.
Madame Posey.
En faveur.
And Mr. Bacharach.
In favor.
Okay, so that is 4 opposed, 7 for, and 4 opposed.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
So given the fact that that one passed and now CPC 5 is no longer movable.
That's right. Yeah.
Can I just ask what the rules are in regards to when a particular amendment has not been read? What are we allowed to? What are the rules around? Is it violate parliamentary privilege to show those things? Because again, we work, for quite hard, to present these things. We had this one in was one of the first amendments we put in, and we want to be able to say that we actually did the work. So is this protected by parliamentary privilege? If yourself or the clerk could please just let us know. Just we want to honor parliamentary privilege if it is considered privileged.
That's an interesting question. My gut tells me that you're free to share it. I mean, but I could be wrong. Would Madam Clerk like to?
Since it hasn't been moved, it doesn't belong to the committee at this point. So it's the members are free to do what they wish with it.
Thank you. Appreciate the clarity.
Good. So now the question is, shall clause 8 as amended carry? Anyone want to speak to that? No? Can we go to?
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just simply, we're going to be opposing as amended. It's unfortunate that the government did not deem it important to include different factors. For example, economic factors, some of the social factors. If you can watch any talk show or podcast that talks about these issues, there will be impacts. And I think that if the onus is on the government when they propose a new rule or new regime, that there should be some factors in it. Look, I have nothing against Indigenous knowledge, although I will say that when we get to the definition of Indigenous knowledge, I might ask a few questions around that. But I go back to what Member McLeod had said, is that there wasn't a lot of work done to consult with First Nations. There's not a lot in this particular clause that talks about social impacts, that talks about economic impacts, or even on national unity, because we think that it's important that the government, when you're making these decisions, that you say to the people exactly what it means to them, because there will be some areas of this country that will be more affected than others. And so that's why Conservatives don't believe that the government or this committee has gotten this right. I'm quite, I wish we had the ability to be able to have a full debate on this, because our amendment, I think, would have at least allowed for those things to come forward. But I do respect the committee, and we'll just leave it there.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure I'm not making an error here. My script, asks me to ask the committee if clause 8 as amended should carry, but then after that decision, we go to a potential new clause 8.1. That's the proper logic.
I would think not, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, that didn't. I caught my eye. Could Maître Tivierge tell me if we need to go to PV 11 before I ask the committee if they want to adopt clause 8?
No, you need to vote on clause 8,
okay.
and then
Then we go to
PP9
8.1.
would create a new
Got it.
clause.
Okay. So then I stand corrected. Shall clause 8 as amended carry? Madam Clerk, if you could do the roll call.
Certainly. Mr. Baker,
In favor.
Mr. Biddle,
In favor.
Monsieur Durand,
En faveur.
Mr. Saini,
In favor.
Ms. Sachs,
In favor?
Mr. Albus,
Contre.
Mr. Generer,
Against.
Ms. McLeod,
Opposed?
Mr. Redekop,
No.
Madame Posey,
Pour.
and Mr. Bacharach.
I'm in favor.
So that is 7, 4, and 4 against.
Okay, so it carries as amended, and now we'll go to Ms. May's PV 11 to see if we add clause 8.1. Ms. May?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry for speaking without you recognizing me, but I was in violent agreement with you, so I think it'd be all right. But
Whenever you're in violent agreement with me, you can speak up anytime.
it seems like we were both wrong. Now this amendment is to ensure that there actually is accountability in the legislation. And it speaks to the ensuring that the minister is ultimately accountable for coordinating the action relating to the climate goals. And you'll note that the important use of the minister must. So the minister must ensure that all measures and strategies within federal authority are implemented to ensure that the national greenhouse gas emission target for each milestone year is met, and that the national greenhouse gas emissions target for 2050 is met. So there's two important elements to this. One, ensuring that the minister has a responsibility for coordinating the various pieces that are required to achieve the goals of climate accountability. And by using obligatory language, the minister must. So again, the amendment itself also came forth in evidence from West Coast Environmental Law, but I also put it to one of our other witnesses, Professor Wright from the Faculty of Law at University of Calgary. You may recall when I asked him if it wouldn't improve the legislation if we had more language, such as the minister must. You'll recall the conversation about justiciability and the best way to ensure that we had some accountability, some potential for citizen enforcement in the act. It's not likely this would ever get to a court. Courts hate this kind of thing, but that's why the language is as forceful as it is and includes things that I'm sure any minister will want to be sure they are coordinating. All measures and strategies within federal authority implemented to ensure that the national targets are met. So that's as briefly as I can put it, Mr. Chair, and I think it does a lot to strengthen the act.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Albus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank my colleague from British Columbia for putting this forward. Again, we have consistently tried to strengthen this bill by putting it not the onus on one minister, but actually to have it on the onus on cabinet, because we do believe it takes an all hands on deck approach and a whole of government approach. And unfortunately, putting a minister such as Minister Wilkinson or future ministers of the environment and climate change on the hook for the actions of crown corporations that report to other ministers, as well as the general departments that he or she is not responsible for, I don't think is a good approach. That being said, I sincerely appreciate the member trying to raise accountability, but again, to be fair to that individual, they are not necessarily accountable. The Prime Minister and his cabinet or her cabinet are the ones that should be the ones bearing the most responsibility. And that is why conservatives have continually said that it should be, you know, if there is an action that's brought forward, it could be brought forward by an individual minister on the recommendation to cabinet, but it should be the cabinet itself that endorses and debates and deliberates and puts in place those mechanisms. So we will not be supporting this, but I do applaud her thoughtfulness to try to make sure that there is accountability. Oftentimes, I do not see this government being accountable. It seems that they are more about putting out the announcement than necessarily seeing seeing what is implemented done well and competently.
Mr. Redekop. Mr. Redekop? You had your hand up. You're on mute, though.
There we go. Sorry about that. Just a question for the witnesses, either Mr. Moffat or Mr. Nivison. Is this even doable? Like, can you have essentially this, in my mind, this creates a super minister because he's now responsible for everything within federal authority. And as Mr. Albas just pointed out, if, you know, whatever the jurisdiction of finance and transport and everything would come under this, is it reasonable for this to even be implemented, or is there precedent for this and other measures?
This is for Mr. Moffat, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I'm not sure how the term ensure would be interpreted. As members are aware, there's an obligation in the Act on the part of on the Minister of Environment and Climate Change to consult with other ministers in order to ensure a whole of government approach. Whether this would give the Minister of Environment some extraordinary powers, I'm not able to opine on, but I think the underlying objective here is clear, that that the minister needs to take as broad a suite of actions as possible.
Are you aware of any other legislation or departments where this type of wording has been effectively implemented?
I'm not personally, no. I can't assure this committee that I've done a thorough review of federal legislation.
Okay, Madame Posey.
Oui, merci.
Yes, thank you. Well, we will be voting for this amendment. First of all, I'd like to repeat that several witnesses who appeared asked for the bill to be strengthened. Up until now, the amendments that we've voted on don't strengthen much of anything. So I think here is perhaps an opportunity to finally listen to what the witnesses have told us when they appeared before the committee. And going beyond any party partisanship, I think this amendment could, in fact, accomplish what it's been put there to accomplish, which is to strengthen the Act so that it can reach and achieve its goals. I'd also like to add, the Minister of the Environment doesn't work alone anyways. Environment Minister, there's also all of the ministers of the environment of the provinces who are all together. There are all kinds of consultations that takes place. So I have no particular fear that this will lead to some sort of super minister powers. Thank you. No one else has asked for the floor. So we can move to the vote. Madam Clerk, could you begin?
We're voting on PV 11, new clause 8.1. Mr. Baker.
Opposed.
Mr. Biddle.
Opposed.
Monsieur Drouin.
Contre.
Mr. Saini.
Opposed.
Ms. Sachs.
Opposed.
Mr. Albas.
Opposed.
Mr. Jenner.
Opposed.
Ms. McLeod.
Opposed.
Mr. Redekop.
Opposed.
Madame Posey.
En faveur.
And Mr. Bachrach.
In favor.
So that is 2 in favor, 9 opposed.
Okay, so we'll move on now to Clause 9 and CPC 6. Mr. Albas?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, 1 second. I'm just getting my note out here. Okay, so Mr. Chair, I will come as no surprise that we want to make sure that there is a whole of government approach. Again, we've heard a few things that Mr. Moffat has said in regards to the minister must consult. that doesn't necessarily mean that the minister has authority nor accountability when it comes to other departments. And that's where we think that the bill gets it wrong by putting the focus on just one minister in terms of it. And we would all be better off if Clause 9 was to include the governor and council must, on the advice of the minister, establish a greenhouse gas. Again, this changes the model, and I would hope that that members might be coming around, because sometimes you have to keep punching through, Mr. Chair. As you know, in your times in politics, sometimes you have to keep saying it over and over before people tune in and suddenly say, yes, I'm for this. So I'm really hopeful that I will see maybe Mr. Bachrach or someone else, maybe Mr. Baker, who keeps teasing his support, will respond and vote in favor of this amendment, because quite honestly, the more collaborative we have and the more focused cabinet is on it, I think we'll end up with a better result.
Okay. Do your comments, I mean, you're free to speak to CPC 7 separately, but they seem to apply to CPC 7 too. But anyway, we'll vote on CPC 6. Madam Clerk?
Yes. Okay. CPC 6, Mr. Baker.
Despite Mr. Albus's advocacy, I am opposed.
Mr. Biddle?
Opposed.
Monsieur Drouin?
Contre.
Mr. Saini?
Opposed.
Ms. Sachs? Opposed. Mr. Albus?
For.
Mr. Genereux?
In favor.
Ms. McLeod?
In favor.
Mr. Redekop?
In favor.
Madame Posey?
Contre.
Mr. Bacharach?
Opposed.
So that is 4 in favor and 7 opposed.
Okay, so we go to CPC 7. Mr. Albus, do you need to intervene on that? Or?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So again, keeping with a whole of government, all hands on deck approach, this would make the governor and council must establish a emissions reduction. So again, this strengthens the bill, increases the accountability on the government for its efforts. And again, every cabinet minister, when they ratify this, would then become part of the solution rather than hanging back where, I don't know if you've ever heard of this before, Mr. Chair, but sometimes people tell me that government works in silos. And the idea about these amendments is to break those silos down, to have ministers talking about ideas and coming around to a consensus at cabinet, and then standing behind those in their different departments. Right now, leaving it just to one minister to administer all plans. I know from my own personal experience, when I in my previous business experience, or even working as an MP, when I bring my team together with some of my ideas, they often improve them. Sometimes massively improve them. Most people would say massively is an understatement. So I would just simply, again, encourage all members to vote in favor of this, because if you want to see better things, then you have to change the way you do it. And I think making the governor and council more responsible and more accountable would do that.
So you're seeking a holistic approach. Okay, so CPC 7, let's vote, Madam Clerk.
Sure. Mr. Baker?
I holistically oppose.
Mr. Biddle?
Oppose.
Monsieur Drouin?
Contre.
Mr. Saini?
I oppose.
Ms. Sachs? Opposed. Mr. Albus?
Support.
Mr. Genereux?
In favor.
Ms. McLeod?
In favor.
Mr. Redekop?
I support this.
Madame Posey?
Contre.
Mr. Bacharach?
I'm opposed.
So that is 4 in favor and 7 opposed.
Okay, so we go now to PV 12, and I would note that if PV 12 is adopted, PV 13 cannot be moved as they amend the same line. Ms. May.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is, again, just to clarify, although it uses the year 2025 for reference point, it is not another attempt to my previous amendment, which was defeated, to create a 2020, well, several amendments that were defeated to create a 2025 milestone year. It is to say in amending clause 9, if you go to the relevant section, it says the plan for 2030, the minister must establish, this is the current draft, the minister must establish an emissions reduction plan for 2030 within 6 months after the day on which the act comes into force. So my amendment would require a plan for 2025 and 2030. Without creating a milestone year at 2025, it would require a plan for 2025 within 6 months in tandem with the plan for 2030. It can only improve the chances that we're actually going to be on track to have a plan for 2025 within 6 months of when this act comes into force. I'm feeling fairly despairing at this point, Mr. Chair, but you never know. I hope the committee will vote for this motion.
Thank you. Seeing no other hands up, can we proceed to the vote on PV 12?
Yes, Mr. Baker,
Opposed?
Mr. Biddle,
Opposed.
Monsieur Drouin,
Contre.
Mr. Saini,
Opposed.
Ms. Sachs, opposed, Mr. Albus,
Opposed.
Mr. Genereux,
Opposed.
Ms. McLeod,
Opposed.
Mr. Redekop,
Opposed.
Madame Posey,
En faveur.
and Mr. Bacharach.
Opposed.
That is 1 in favor and 10 opposed.
PV 13, Ms. May.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is similar to the one the committee just defeated, but I think it would be well worth mentioning some of the other witnesses who, and those who did not get to testify in person. As Kathy McLeod mentioned, there were no Indigenous witnesses present before committee, but in written brief from the Tsleil-Waututh Nation, definitely called for a 2025 year. So did, of course, the Canadian Climate Action Network. Generation Squeeze, another witness that called for this, and Eco Elders for Climate Action, the 2025 plan being essential if we're going to see early action. So this is, again, to keep everybody on the right page, PV 13, amending that same line, but this time just stressing the need for a plan for 2025 within 6 months from the day when this act comes into force. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any hands up? No, I don't see any up. Going once, twice. Mr. Bacharach. You're on mute, I think.
That was the best part of my remarks. I take Ms. May's point, and I heard the same testimony as did every member of this committee. And I believe that the need for a near-term accountability measure is very well established and well-founded. I think as we go through these amendments, it will become clear that in order to gain enough support for that near-term accountability measure, it's going to have to be something other than 2025. And so, regrettably, that's why I'll be voting against these amendments. And I believe that the spirit of these amendments, which is that we need that near-term accountability measure and we need planning that reflects that measure, will be reflected in future amendments.
Okay, seeing no more hands, we'll vote. Madam Clerk?
Mr.
Yes,
Chair,
Mr. Baker.
Yes, sorry.
I'm
Yes.
sorry the vote has started. I shouldn't have. May I respond briefly to Mr. Bacharach?
Sure.
Okay. I won't be able to speak to the next amendment that comes up, which is being moved by the NDP, which does talk about something sooner than 2030. It's half a loaf. I'll just say that. It's an interim objective, which is not the same as a plan, a target, or a milestone year. So I regret very much that this is the most the NDP could get out of negotiations with government. Obviously, that's how they feel that their chances were to improve the act. I wouldn't have accepted half a loaf, not with so much at stake. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Mr. Al. Well.
Yeah. No, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just ask Mr. Moffat. What is, obviously there is the emissions reduction plan that PV 13 is calling for one to be done for 2025. And given the fact that there's been some contrast already made with the next one, NDP 2, which talks about an interim greenhouse emission objective, what is the difference? Are they the same thing?
No, short answer is, and I apologize if I sound like I'm splitting hairs, but the Act makes a fairly significant distinction between targets and plans. So this particular amendment has to do with establishing a 2025 plan, whereas the subsequent NDP amendment that you referred to would require that the 2030 plan include a GHG emission objective. So introducing a third term, but the objective would be for 2026 and would be an element of the 2030 plan that would need to be created or published within 6 months of the bill coming into force. I hope that is clear.
So there is no set criteria for an interim greenhouse gas emission objective. It's just something that the government is promising to do as part of the 2030 plan?
Well, if NDP 2 is passed, it would be more than a promise. It would be a legal obligation.
Okay, but there's no granularity on what would be included in that, is there?
No, you're correct. At the moment, it is simply described as a interim greenhouse gas emission objective.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, I'm told, we were lucky to get to keep going to 8 o'clock. It's 7:58, 7:59, and so with 8 o'clock's a hard stop. So we did make quite a bit of progress. I think we're more than a third through, or at least a third through, and so we'll carry on next time. We'll starting with NDP 2, and
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I don't believe we took the vote on PV 13.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, boy, it's been a long day. Can we do the? Thank you, Madam Clerk. Can we do the vote on PV 13?
Yes, we're very good at that. So, Mr. Baker.
Opposed.
Mr. Biddle.
Opposed.
Monsieur Drouin.
Contre.
Mr. Saini.
Opposed.
Ms. Sachs. Opposed. Mr. Albus.
Opposed.
Mr. Genereux.
Opposed.
Ms. McLeod.
Opposed.
Mr. Ridicop.
Opposed.
Madame Posey.
En faveur.
And Mr. Bacharach.
Opposed.
So that is 1 in favor, 10 opposed.
Okay, so we'll. Can I have a motion to adjourn? We'll stop there and we'll pick up with NDP.
So moved.
2. Yeah. Okay. And
when's the next time the committee's meeting?
it should be not this week. This is our only meeting this week, which is why we doubled up and went for 4 hours. It'll be Monday.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So on that, we'll just close the meeting and we'll see everyone on Monday.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, everybody.